Danny and I had done 4 trips together before the Gila. 2 in the Weminush, 1 in the Pecos, 1 in the Superstitions that we cut short because of heat. We had a system. He carried the map and did the navigation. I carried the stove and did the water. Neither of us was new at this. I want that on the record before I tell you what happened. Because everything that went wrong out there went wrong on purpose, and it wasn't ours. This was the last week of April, 2024. 5 days, 4 nights. We left my truck at the TJ Corral trailhead near the Gila Cliff Dwellings in southwest New Mexico and planned a loop. Down Little Bear Canyon to the Middle Fork of the Gila River, up the Middle Fork past Jordan Hot Springs, then a climb out of the canyon and a return along the high country. 41 miles, give or take. Danny had printed the maps himself and laminated them at his office. I had a compass, a filter, and 100 feet of cord, standard kit. A couple of details about the Gila for people who haven't been. There's no permit system in the wilderness itself. You don't register, you don't reserve, you just park and walk in, which means no ranger anywhere holds a list with your name and your route on it. We left an itinerary with my wife, the way we always do, with instructions to make calls if she hadn't heard from me by Saturday night. We topped off water and bought 2 candy bars at Doc Campbell's Post, the little store near the trailhead, and I made my last phone call from the gravel lot out front because I knew the signal died a quarter mile up the road. I told her the weather looked perfect. It did. Low 70s, cold nights, the river running clear and about knee-deep at the crossings. The other detail is the emptiness. Late April is prime season down there, and in 5 days we saw 11 other human beings, 10 of them in the first day and a half within a few miles of the cliff dwellings. Past Jordan Hot Springs, nobody. That's normal for the Gila, and it's exactly why we chose it. Keep that in mind while you read the rest of this. Every decision we made knowing that yelling for help was a waste of breath. Day 1 went the way day 1 always goes. Little Bear Canyon narrows down to a slot near the bottom, and then it opens up and dumps you at the Middle Fork. And the river country down there is honestly some of the prettiest walking in the state. Cliffs banded orange and gray, cottonwoods just leafing out. We crossed the river maybe a dozen times before we made camp below Jordan Hot Springs. Soaked for an hour, ate dinner, slept fine. I'll say this now so it means something later. The Middle Fork Trail crosses the river constantly, and the crossings are marked with rock cairns. Somebody stacks 4 or 5 flat stones on one bank, and that tells you where to ford and where the trail picks up on the other side. In between, you get the occasional strip of orange flagging tape tied to a branch, usually where flood debris has erased the tread. You learn to trust the cairns. Everybody who walks that canyon trusts the cairns. Day 2, the cairns started lying to us. The first one was small. A cairn put us across the river at a wide gravel bar, and on the far side there was nothing. No tread, no tape, just willow thickets. Danny checked the map, found the actual trail 80 yards upstream, and we wrote it off. Flood damage. Cairns get rebuilt wrong all the time by well-meaning people. The second one was not small. Around midday, we hit a junction where a side drainage came into the Middle Fork from the west. There was supposed to be a trail sign there. Danny's map showed one, and the map was only 2 years old. No sign. There was a fresh cairn, though, a big one, knee-high, sitting at the mouth of the side drainage, and a strip of orange tape 30 feet up it. The main canyon ahead of us looked choked with deadfall. The side drainage looked walked in. If you didn't have a map or if you trusted rocks more than paper, you'd have taken the side drainage without a second thought. Danny crouched next to the cairn for a while. Then he said, "The thing that I keep coming back to. These stones are dry on top and wet underneath." It had rained 2 nights before we started. A cairn that had been standing since before the rain would be wet on top or dry all the way through. These rocks had been pulled out of the riverbed and stacked recently, within a day, maybe 2. We should have turned around right then. I've run it back 100 times and that was the moment. But we didn't, because it didn't add up to anything yet. Somebody restacking cairns is a nuisance. It's not a threat. We took 30 steps up the side drainage to see where the flagging led, and 30 steps became a quarter mile because there was more tape ahead, and more, spaced just right, each strip visible from the last one. Whoever hung it understood exactly how a hiker's eye works. The drainage boxed up fast. Walls went vertical on both sides, maybe 200 feet, and the floor pinched down to a strip of sand and boulders. Danny stopped and said this wasn't on any trail, signed or not. And I agreed, and we were in the middle of turning around when I saw the tent. It was 50 yards further up, tucked against the north wall. A green two-person dome collapsed on one side. My first thought was that somebody had left gear behind, which happens. Then we got closer. The tent hadn't been abandoned. It had been cut. Long, straight slices through the fly and the body, the kind you make from outside with a blade. There was a food bag hanging from a juniper snag 20 feet up the wall, professionally hung, untouched. 2 sleeping bags inside the tent, both slashed. 2 packs dumped out. A woman's fleece. A pair of boots, men's, size 11 or so, sitting side by side near the fire ring the way you'd set them before bed. No people. No blood that we could see, and we looked. The sand around the site was scuffed everywhere, drag marks or shuffle marks, impossible to read. Nobody leaves their boots. Nobody leaves a hung food bag. Danny went quiet in a way I'd never seen from him. I remember doing dumb procedural things because my brain wanted a checklist. I checked the food bag line, figured the camp was at least 2 weeks old from the leaf litter on the tent. I found a wallet in the dumped gear. Silver City address. A name I'm not going to type, because it's since been in the news and the family doesn't need it dragged around Reddit. And then Danny said, "Why does a person move cairns?" and answered his own question in the same breath. To bring people here. The drainage we were standing in had one exit, the way we'd come. The walls couldn't be climbed with packs, maybe not without them. Somebody had rebuilt the river cairns to erase the real route, and hung a line of tape leading straight into a trap with one way out. And the tape was fresh, and the stones were fresh, which meant the person maintaining it hadn't quit. We got out of the drainage fast, and we made our second mistake, which was going upstream on the middle fork instead of straight back the way we'd come. The logic seemed sound at the time. The false cairns had been placed on our route in, meaning whoever placed them worked that stretch, watched that stretch. Upstream 4 or 5 miles, the map showed a trail climbing out of the canyon to the west toward Woodland Park, high country, and from the high country we could cut south and drop back to the trailhead a different way. Add a day, avoid the stretch of river he'd rigged. Even now I can't tell you it was the wrong call. I can only tell you it didn't matter, because he wasn't watching the cairns. He was watching us. The first rifle shot came at 4 in the afternoon, when we were strung out on a talus slope leaving the river. I've shot rifles my whole life. This was something in a .30 caliber, and it wasn't close, and it wasn't aimed at us, and both of those facts were obvious from the sound. The bullet hit rock 100 feet ahead of us on the slope, high and left. Then the report rolled down off the rim behind us and bounced around the canyon so long you couldn't have pointed to where it started. You want to know what a warning shot does to your thinking. It doesn't make you panic, it makes you obedient. We froze, then we backed off the slope with our hands half raised, 2 grown men doing exactly what the rock dust told them to do. It took me until that night to understand that this was the whole point. He didn't miss. He steered. The second shot came 40 minutes later when we tried the slope again further south. Same thing. Rock dust ahead of us. Report from behind and above. Somewhere on the east rim. He was telling us the climb west was closed. So here's the situation we were in by dark on day 2. And I'm going to lay it out plain because I need you to understand the math. A man with a rifle held the rim. The river route back to the trailhead ran through his cairns. The climb west was closed. That left north, deeper into the wilderness, or east, up onto the dry mesa country between the Middle Fork and the West Fork. The Gila Wilderness is 550,000 acres. There is no cell coverage anywhere in the interior. Nobody expected us out for 3 more days. which meant nobody would even start wondering for 4, and the mesas east of the river are dry. That's the part I keep needing people to understand. The river had all the water in the world, and the river was his. Up top, Danny's map showed exactly 2 reliable water sources within a day's walk. A stock tank that the map itself marked as seasonal, and a named spring at the head of a drainage about 9 miles southeast, more or less on the line back toward the cliff dwellings. 2 men carrying 5 liters between them. 1 spring that mattered. He'd have known that. He'd have counted our bottles through his scope for all I know. Night 2. We cold camped in a boulder pile 100 yards up from the river. No fire, no stove. Packs loaded so we could move in under a minute. We split the night into watches, 3 hours on, 3 off. I had the first one, and I'm going to describe it exactly and let you sit with it the way I had to. Around 11, from somewhere downstream, I started hearing rock on rock, not random. A clack, a pause, a grind, a clack. Stones being picked up and set down and adjusted. It went on for 20 minutes, quit, then started again further off. I woke Danny for his watch at 1 and didn't have to explain it because it was still going, faint, moving along the river the way a man works when he's got a lot of ground to cover and all night to cover it. He was rebuilding his cairns behind us, closing the road home. Danny and I lay there in the rocks and listened to him do it, and neither of us said one word until gray light, because there was nothing to say that the sound wasn't already saying. At dawn, before we climbed, I crept down to where I could see the nearest crossing. There was a new cairn on our bank, tall, neat, and it pointed at a ford that ended in a logjam on the far side. He'd even hung a fresh strip of tape. I want to be clear that this cairn had not existed at sunset. He built it in the dark within earshot of 2 men he was hunting, and he built it well. We moved at first light on day 3, up a rubble chute on the east wall that no rifle on the far rim could cover, and we were on top before the sun was. The mesa country up there is pinon and juniper and yellow grass, rolling, cut by shallow drainages. Good walking, terrible hiding. Every hour or so, one of us would glass our back trail from inside a tree's shadow, and twice that day I caught him. A tan shirt, a big pack, maybe a mile back, moving when we moved, not closing, holding the interval. That, more than the shots, is the thing that still gets into my sleep. A mile is nothing. A fit man alone in country he knows can run down 2 loaded backpackers in half a day. He didn't. He strolled. Because why would you sprint after something that's walking itself to the only water for 20 miles? We checked the stock tank at 10 in the morning because it was only a half mile off our line and hope is cheap. You could smell the answer before you could see it. The tank was a bulldozed dirt basin, cracked into hexagons, bone dry, and there was a dead cow in the middle of it that had been dead a long time. Danny stood on the berm and looked at it for a second, and then took out the map and drew a line through the tank symbol with his thumbnail, and we walked on. Neither of us mentioned it again. There wasn't a version of mentioning it that helped. By early afternoon the sun had real weight, and we were down under 3 liters. Thirst on a normal trip is an inconvenience. Thirst with a man behind you is a countdown, and you feel it running with every dry swallow. I caught myself rationing spit, holding sips in my mouth, doing the thing where you promise yourself water at the next landmark and then move the landmark. Danny's lips cracked at the corners. We stopped talking except for navigation because talking costs moisture, and the quiet made room for the worst part, which was checking the back trail and finding the tan shirt still there. Patient, unhurried, on schedule. We talked it through at midday, lying in a drainage eating tortillas we couldn't taste. Danny said we had 2 options, and then admitted the first one, running for the trailhead dry, wasn't real. 18 miles of broken country on 2 liters in April sun, with a rifle behind us. If we bonked out there, we'd die of it. Which left the spring, which was a trap, which we would walk into anyway. So we decided to walk into it early. He was pacing us, reading us as 2 tired men who'd reached the spring around dusk, wrecked and desperate. Instead, we found a slot of shade at 2 in the afternoon, made ourselves stop for 3 hours, ate everything with salt in it, and split the last liter down to the gram. Then we walked through the night. No headlamps. Half a moon, which in that country is plenty once your eyes commit to it. I'd never done real night navigation before, and I hope I never do it again. Danny ran the compass and counted paces, and I walked 10 feet ahead of him as the collision detector, and we traded jobs every hour. Piñon country and moonlight all looks identical. Every tree the same tree, every drainage the same drainage, and the only thing keeping us honest was the bearing and the count. Twice we heard elk blow and crash away from us, and both times my whole body fired before my brain caught up. Around 2 a.m. we crossed a fence line, 3 strands of old barbed wire running through the middle of absolute nowhere, and it was strange how much that helped. Somebody had once cared enough about this exact dirt to fence it. We followed it a while because it agreed with our bearing, and I ran my glove along the top strand in the dark, and Danny told me later he'd done the same thing. We dry camped for 2 cold hours before dawn in a juniper thicket a half-mile short of the spring. No bags, just jackets, backs against a trunk, shivering on schedule. And while it was still gray out, we went and looked at the ground we'd be fighting on. The spring sat at the head of a shallow draw. Water seeped out of a rock shelf into a trough somebody had dug generations ago, then wandered downhill through sedge and disappeared. Above the shelf there was a cut bank, chest high, with brush on its lip. Anybody walking to the water would come up the draw with their eyes on the trough. The cut bank owned that whole approach. I'm not going to pretend we executed some brilliant scheme. What we did was crude, and it almost went wrong twice. Danny filled his bottle at the trough and then sat in the open next to it with his boots off, head down, elbows on his knees. A finished man. Bait. I lay under the brush on the cut bank with a rock in my right hand. River cobble, a little bigger than my fist, smooth. I'd carried it 9 miles. He came at 7 a.m, and I'll tell you the truth, I heard him before I saw him, and I nearly threw up from the sound alone. Gravel under a boot, down the draw, unhurried. Then he passed below me, close enough that I could see the sweat line on his hat, and everything about him was worse for being ordinary. 50s, lean, canvas coat. The rifle carried low across his body, casual, muzzle down, because Danny sat there barefoot and broken, and 30 feet away, and there was no rush. There had never been any rush. That was his whole method, out there. Patience and thirst. He said something to Danny. I didn't process the words then, and Danny says he's glad he can't repeat them exactly, but it was calm, and it was about the water, something to the effect that the spring was his, and we'd been drinking it. I came off the cut bank when he was 2 steps past me. He heard it and started to turn, which is why the rock caught him above the ear instead of behind it. He went down sideways, but he kept a grip on the rifle, and the next part was ugly and short, and I don't remember it in order. I remember kneeling on his forearm. I remember Danny arriving barefoot at a dead run and standing on the rifle barrel with both feet. I remember the man under me making a low, steady sound that wasn't quite words, and I remember hitting him once more. And then he was flat and his hands stopped organizing themselves. We rolled him face down. I tied his elbows toward each other behind his back with the cord, wrists with a bootlace, a lead line from his elbows to my hand. Danny worked the bolt on the rifle and thumbed cartridges out into the sedge until it was empty, then slung it over his own shoulder. The man came around within a couple of minutes. He didn't rage and he didn't beg. He asked one question, which was how we'd gotten ahead of schedule, and the plain confusion in his voice told me more about the previous weeks in that canyon than anything the deputies said afterward. His system had worked before. We were an equipment failure. It took us the rest of that day and half the next to bring him out. First order of business was the spring itself. We drank until our stomachs hurt, filled everything, and I washed the side of his head where I'd hit him and tied a bandana over it, which felt insane while I was doing it and still felt insane afterward. And I did it anyway because a prisoner who dies on you in the backcountry becomes a very different story to tell a courtroom. He let me work on him without moving. Up close he smelled of wood smoke and had the hands of a man who'd spent a year doing everything the hard way. 9 hours of it he walked on the lead line without a word. We kept him 10 feet ahead, Danny navigating from the rear with the empty rifle, me holding the cord. And I learned that day that guarding a silent man is more tiring than being hunted by him. You can't rest your attention for a second. Twice he sat down and refused, and both times Danny poured a little water out onto the ground in front of him, and both times he got up. Make of that what you want. The one time he volunteered speech was late afternoon, on the rim above Little Bear, with the whole green seam of the canyon opening up below us. He stopped walking, looked out at it, and said the country used to police itself. That was the entire sentence. Then he started walking again on his own. I've repeated those 5 words to 2 detectives, 1 prosecutor and 1 psychiatrist, that the prosecutor suggested I go talk to, and the psychiatrist was the only one who didn't write them down. We came down Little Bear Canyon on the morning of day 5, met a party of day hikers a mile from the trailhead who took one look at us and gave us the widest berth the canyon allowed, and reached the truck just before noon. We put him in the bed and I sat back there with him, and Danny drove us to the Gila Visitor Center, where a seasonal employee about 20 years old picked up a landline and said words into it that I imagine she never had to say again for the rest of her career. Catron County is enormous and mostly empty, and it still took the law less than an hour to get there, which tells you how it got prioritized. State police first, then deputies, then over the following days people whose agencies I never got straight. He'd been living in the wilderness interior for about 11 months. He had a record out of Arizona and a camp the investigators eventually found in a cave above the Middle Fork with, among other things, 6 backpacks in it. The couple from the cut tent, the Silver City address, were recovered in October from a talus field a half-mile from that box drainage. I followed the case up until the plea, which spared everyone a trial, and then I made myself stop following it. Danny mailed me my river cobble in December. It sits on my workbench. Neither of us has been back to the Gila, but we did the Pecos again this spring. And on the second day, I watched Danny stop at a trail junction, crouch next to the cairn, and lift the top stone to feel its underside. Dry all the way through. We walked on. I've gone back and forth on posting this for almost 2 years. Part of it is that I still feel stupid about how long it took me to figure out what was happening. Part of it is that saying it out loud makes it real again, and I've spent a lot of effort making it not real. But my aunt sold the house last fall, the guy took a plea deal, and my therapist says writing it down might help me sleep through the night again. So here it is. Every word of this happened in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in the summer of 2019. Quick background so the rest of this makes sense. I was 21 that summer, between my junior and senior year at UTC, and broke in the specific way where you're not starving, but you check your bank app before buying a gas station sandwich. My lease ended in May, and my new one didn't start until mid-August, and I was staring down 3 months of either moving back in with my parents in Cleveland, Tennessee, or couch surfing. Then my Aunt Carol called my mom. Aunt Carol had lived alone in St. Elmo since her divorce, in a little brick ranch house her parents bought back in the 60s. If you don't know Chattanooga, St. Elmo is the old neighborhood at the bottom of Lookout Mountain, right where the incline railway starts. Narrow streets, big trees, houses from the 20s through the 50s packed close together. The mountain sits over the whole neighborhood, and in the evening the shadow comes down the slope and the streetlights kick on early. I always liked it there as a kid. Aunt Carol's sister-in-law in Sarasota had broken her hip, and Carol was going down to Florida for the whole summer to help her through surgery and rehab. She didn't want the house sitting empty for 3 months, and she didn't want to pay anybody. My mom volunteered me before I could say anything, which was fine, because I would have said yes anyway. Free house, whole summer, 10-minute drive to my job. I was delivering for a restaurant downtown 4 nights a week and picking up warehouse shifts at a distribution center off Amnicola Highway when they needed bodies. The plan, if you can call it that, was to bank money all summer and show up to senior year not broke for once. I moved in the last week of May. Carol left me 2 pages of handwritten notes on the kitchen counter. Water the ferns on the porch. Trash goes out Tuesday night. The AC unit is old, keep it at 74, or the compressor gets mad. Don't let anybody park in the driveway blocking the neighbor's mailbox because the mailman will skip both houses out of spite. The garage door sticks. Mow every other week, or Mr. Hensley across the street will do it himself, and then she'd owe him a pie. The house itself was built in 1954, and it had that layout every ranch from that decade has. 3 small bedrooms down a hallway, 1 bathroom, living room in front, kitchen in back, den off the kitchen that used to be a porch before somebody closed it in. Hardwood floors that announced every step. A basement you got to from outside, just a low concrete room with the water heater, the furnace, some shelves, and about 60 years of paint cans. And an attic, which matters, so I'll describe it properly. The attic access was a plywood panel in the ceiling of the hallway closet, not one of those pull-down ladder deals, just a painted square of plywood resting in a frame, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet, up above the closet shelf. To get up there, you'd have to clear the shelf, climb it, push the panel up and over, and haul yourself through. I saw it exactly once, the day I moved in, when I was shoving my winter stuff onto that closet shelf. I remember thinking there was no way I'd ever have a reason to go up there. The attic itself, as I'd learn later, ran the whole length of the house. Low, unfinished, blown-in insulation. A plywood walkway down the center that Carol's dad had laid so he could get to the vent fan. At the far end, over the den, the roofline dropped, and the attic pinched down into a crawl space maybe 3 feet tall, dark even at noon, where the ductwork ran. I'm laying all this out because for most of June and July, I didn't think about the attic one single time. Nobody thinks about their attic. That's the whole point of an attic. It's the part of the house your brain deletes. The first few weeks were honestly great. I worked nights, slept until 10 or 11, spent afternoons playing Xbox on Carol's ancient TV, or walking up to the coffee place on St. Elmo Avenue. The neighborhood was quiet in a way my college apartment never was. Old couples walking dogs, tourists trickling toward the incline station, the freight trains running along the base of the mountain a few blocks over, which sounds annoying, but you stop hearing them after 4 days. The only thing I'd change was the AC, which wheezed the way Carol warned me it would, and the fact that the house made noise at night. Every old house makes noise at night. Wood swelling, ducks ticking, the fridge cycling. I want to be fair to myself about this, because a lot of what came later hid inside that fact. When a 50-year-old house pops and creaks every single night, a footstep doesn't sound like a footstep. It sounds routine. The first thing I noticed, or the first thing I can point to now and say that was him, was the peanut butter. I'd bought groceries the first week of June. Real groceries, because for once I had a kitchen and no roommates. One of the things I bought was a big jar of peanut butter, the 40-ounce one, because it was on sale at the Food City on Broad Street. I had toast with peanut butter maybe 3 mornings that week. Then I didn't touch it for a while because I got on a cereal thing. Around the middle of June I went back to it, and when I unscrewed the lid the jar was down to maybe a third. I stood there in the kitchen actually doing the math. 3 breakfasts, 2 tablespoons of breakfast, maybe 3, because I'm not a monster. That's not 2/3 of a 40-ounce jar. I remember laughing at myself for standing in a kitchen at 11 in the morning auditing my own peanut butter consumption. I decided I'd eaten more than I remembered, probably some late-night spoonfuls after work I'd forgotten, and I moved on. That's what you do. You have a weird little moment. You find the boring explanation. You move on. The bread went the same way. A loaf that should have lasted a week and a half was gone in 6 days, and I never once remembered it being low until it was suddenly 2 heels in a bag. Cans of soup I could have sworn I bought didn't seem to be in the pantry, but I couldn't swear to it hard enough to matter, because who memorizes their soup inventory? A box of granola bars I'd bought for warehouse shifts had 4 left, when I thought it should have had 6 or 7. Every single one of these, on its own, is nothing. I want to be clear about that. If you took any one of those to a friend, they'd tell you to get more sleep. And that's exactly what I told myself. Because I was working until midnight most nights, and my sleep schedule was garbage. There was one other thing in June that I filed away wrong, and this one still gets me. The hall bathroom had one of those old medicine cabinets with a mirrored door that never quite shut flush. One evening before work, I noticed the door was hanging open about an inch. Inside, my stuff was all where I'd left it, but Carol's shelf, the top one, looked different. She'd left behind the usual stuff people leave: aspirin, an old prescription bottle, cough syrup, Band-Aids. I couldn't tell you exactly what was different. It was the same feeling as when someone else has driven your car, and the seat is off by an inch. I chalked it up to me digging around for tweezers a few days before and knocked the door shut with one finger. The prescription bottle, I found out much later from the police inventory, was an expired painkiller prescription from Carol's knee surgery. By July, it was empty. I never opened that bottle once. June turned into July and Chattanooga did what it does, which is turn into a swamp. Mid-90s, humidity you could chew. The old AC ran constantly and barely held 76, and I kept the blinds shut all day to help it out, which meant the house was dim even in the afternoons. I mention the heat because it's the reason for the next part. I started sleeping with my bedroom door shut and a box fan running on high right next to the bed. Between the fan, the AC, and the trains, I was sleeping inside a wall of white noise. Whole categories of sound stopped existing for me between 1 and 9 in the morning. If I could change one thing about that summer, it would be that fan. Not because anything happened to me while it ran. Because of everything it let happen without me hearing it. The water thing started in early July. The first time, I got up around 3 in the morning to use the bathroom, half asleep, and as I came down the hall, I heard water running and then stop. Not the toilet, pipes. The specific rush of water moving through the wall, then a clunk when it quit, which the house did whenever a faucet closed. Water hammer, it's called. I stood in the hallway for a second, listened, heard nothing else, and decided it was the ice maker in the fridge filling up. The fridge did make noises. That was a real thing. I used the bathroom and went back to bed, and I swear I'd forgotten it by morning. The second time, maybe a week later, I hadn't gotten up for anything. I woke up because the fan clicked off. The power blinked, just a flicker. The fan died and spun back up 2 seconds later, but in that little gap of silence, I heard water shut off somewhere in the house, 3:20 in the morning. I lay there and told myself I'd dreamed the first half of it and only really heard the fan surging back on. But I noticed I was lying very still, and I noticed I was listening, and I noticed it took me a long time to fall back asleep. Your body figures these things out way before your brain agrees to. I know that now. In the morning, I checked the kitchen and the bathroom. Everything was dry. Everything was normal except the bar of soap in the hall bathroom was sitting in the dish with a wet underside. I picked it up and felt it and stood there. Then I remembered I'd showered before bed, barely 8 hours earlier, and soap stays damp in a dish, especially in July, especially in a bathroom with no window. That was true. It was a completely true fact, and I used it to close the case. Here's the part where I have to tell you about the smell. Twice in July, both times in the evening, I walked down the hallway and hit a smell that didn't belong to me. It's hard to describe without sounding dramatic. It was body odor, but old, layered, with something sweet and wrong underneath. And cigarettes, except stale. The kind of smell that soaks into a smoker's jacket, not fresh smoke. It lived in a stretch of hallway about 6 feet long, right around the closet door, and it was gone by the time I doubled back to check. Both times I opened the closet, looked at my own winter coats, sniffed around, and got nothing. I decided it was the closet itself. Old houses have smells, mothballs, and mildew, and 60 years of other people's lives soaked into the plaster. Carol's whole house had a smell, the way every grandparent adjacent house does. This was just a pocket of it, I figured. A bad pocket. The dog next door didn't agree with me. The neighbors on the right, the Brays, had a beagle mix named Otis, who spent his days in their fenced backyard. Sometime in July, Otis developed a personal grudge against Carol's house. Not the yard, the house. He'd stand at the fence line and bark at the back corner of it, over the den, up high. 10, 15 minutes at a stretch. Mrs. Bray apologized to me over the fence one afternoon and said he'd been doing it at night too, and they'd started bringing him in earlier. She said, and I remember this exactly, "He acts like there's a squirrel in your roof." And then she said the sentence that should have ended this whole story a month early. She said, "You might want to have somebody look. We had raccoons in our attic in 2015 and they tore it up." Raccoons. A perfect explanation. It explained the noises I'd half heard and stopped counting. Little thumps that moved. A dragging sound one night that I'd blamed on a branch on the roof. Scratching I'd been attributing to the ductwork ticking as it cooled. Raccoons in the attic explained 100% of it, and better, it made everything a normal person's problem with a normal person's solution. I texted Carol that night. "Hey, might have raccoons in the attic. Otis has been barking at the roof. Want me to call somebody?" She wrote back that there was a company she'd used for squirrels years ago. She'd find the number. And not to go up there myself because the walkway boards were loose past the vent fan, and I'd put a leg through her hallway ceiling. I said no problem. I had no plans to go up there. None. Carol never found the number, and I never followed up because 2 days later, I got put on a run of day shifts at the warehouse covering for a guy whose wife had a baby, and for about 10 days I was working doubles, and the raccoons fell off the list. This is the stretch I have the hardest time with. For those 10 days I was leaving the house at 6:40 in the morning and getting home close to midnight. The house sat empty, or what I thought was empty, for 17 hours a day. When police later put together a timeline, they figured this was when he stopped being careful. Why would he be careful? He had the place to himself. Things were different when the doubles ended, and I got my nights back. Nothing I could photograph. The differences were all 1 degree off from provable. The kitchen chair I never used, the one on the far side of the table, was pulled out at an angle one morning. The TV input was on channel 3, the dead input, when I always left it on HDMI 1 for the Xbox. The back den smelled faintly of cigarettes one night, and the window in there, painted shut since probably the Clinton administration, had fresh chips in the paint along the sash. $40 I kept in a coffee mug in the cabinet. Tip money I was saving for a concert was down to 30, and I'd have bet anything it was 40. But it's tip money in a mug, you see the problem. Every one of these things I noticed, held for a second, and put down. I was tired. The house was old. Carol's chair might have always been crooked. I might have bumped the TV remote. I might have spent the 10 and forgotten. You want to know the truly stupid part? I did think someone might have been in the house. For about a day, I ran with the idea that a neighbor had a key. Old neighborhoods are like that. Carol had lived there forever. Half the block probably had a key from some cat feeding arrangement in 2006. I figured maybe Mr. Hensley was coming in to check on things, being nosy in a harmless retired guy way, moving a chair, using the bathroom. I even thought about asking him, then imagined how insulting that conversation would go, and dropped it. Some part of my brain was willing to accept an intruder as long as the intruder was 70 years old and lived across the street. It just wasn't willing to go one house darker than that. There's one more night from late July I have to put in here, because at the time it was a footnote, and now it's the thing I think about most. The last Friday of the month, a storm line came through Chattanooga around 9 at night and knocked the power out for half of St. Elmo. The restaurant lost power too, so they cut the delivery drivers loose early, and I came home at 9:40 instead of midnight. 2 hours and 20 minutes early, on a night with no porch lights, no street lights, the whole block dead dark under the mountain, rain still coming down. I let myself in the front door with my phone flashlight, and the house was black and hot with the AC down, and I stood in the living room shaking the rain off, and I heard a single thump from the back of the house. One thump, solid, with weight behind it. I froze and aimed the flashlight down the hallway and said hello, which is an insane thing to say into your own empty house, and got nothing. So I did the flashlight walk. Living room, kitchen, den, both bedrooms, bathroom, closets, even behind the shower curtain. Feeling stupider with every room, and every room was empty. The back door was locked. The windows were shut. By the time I got to the last bedroom, my heart had come down and I'd already picked my explanation off the shelf. A tree branch on the roof, storm outside. Obviously, storms make noise. But here's what I noticed and threw away. The den, the closed-in porch off the kitchen, was warm the way the whole house was warm, but it smelled occupied. That's the only word I've ever found for it. Not cigarettes, not the hallway smell, nothing I could name. Just the difference between air that's been sitting still and air that hasn't. And on the arm of the recliner in the corner, Carol's recliner, there was a glass. Empty, dry, just a glass. I looked at it and had the thought, did I leave that there? And answered myself, must have, and picked it up and washed it in the dark kitchen and went to bed when the power came back an hour later. I want to walk through what the timeline says actually happened that night, because the police pieced it together, and it lives in my head rent-free. On restaurant nights, I never got home before 11:50. Ever. That was a rule of the universe as reliable as sunrise, and it had been established over 8 weeks of watching. At 9:40 on a Friday, the house was supposed to be his for another 2 hours. When my headlights hit the driveway, he wasn't in the attic. A man doesn't sit in a 110-degree attic during a power outage with the fan dead. He was down in the house, in the dark, in the recliner in the den, and my key hit the front door with no warning at all, no car sound under the rain, no time to get down the hall, up the shelf, and through the panel. So where was he while I walked room to room with a phone flashlight saying hello? The den had the recliner, a love seat, a chest freezer that hadn't run in years, and floor-length curtains on the window that faced the backyard. I put the light in that room for maybe 8 seconds. I looked at the recliner. I looked at the glass. I did not look behind the curtains, and I did not look in the gap between the freezer and the wall, because I was a college kid checking boxes so he could stop being scared, not a person who actually believed anyone was there. The thump I heard when I walked in, best guess, was him getting out of the recliner too fast when the front lock turned. He then stood somewhere in that little room, 5 or 6 feet from me, both of us in the dark, while my light swung past, and he did it so calmly, so quietly, that I washed his glass and went to bed. I slept that night, that same night, 30 feet from where he stood. When I can't sleep now, it's not the hallway I see. It's me in that den doorway, light in my hand, saying hello, and the answer standing right there in the dark, choosing not to give it. The thing that finally broke through wasn't a sound or a smell. It was a phone charger. First week of August, a Saturday, the AC shut off completely. Not struggling, not blowing warm, just dead, no hum, nothing. And the house started climbing toward the outside temperature within the hour. Carol's notes covered this one. She'd written that the drain line in the basement clogged up with algae every couple of summers, and when it backed up, it tripped a safety switch that killed the whole system, and the fix was to clear the line and the unit would come back on its own. So Saturday morning, I walked around the side of the house, opened the basement door, pulled the string on the light, and went in for the first time since May. The drain line was clogged, exactly like she said. There was a shop vac down there, but it was wedged in behind a row of old paint cans on the floor along the wall, so I had to squat down and start shifting cans out of the way to drag it free. That's the only reason I saw it. Behind the paint cans, tucked into the shadow line where the floor met the wall, there was an extension cord. A brown extension cord, plugged into the outlet by the shelves, running low along the base of the wall behind the cans and disappearing into the gap behind the water heater. Brown, in a basement full of gray concrete and dark corners, hidden behind a row of cans nobody had moved in years. You could stand in that basement 50 times and never see it, and I understood later that this was the whole idea. But I was on my knees 6 inches from it, and I knew immediately that I hadn't done that. And I felt every hair on my arms come up before I'd consciously worked out why. I made myself walk over and look into the gap. Behind the water heater, sitting on the concrete in the warm dark, there was a power strip. Plugged into the power strip was a phone charger with a cable coiled up neat, a second charger for some off-brand device I didn't recognize, and a small rechargeable lantern, the camping kind, sitting there topped off and ready. Next to the power strip was a plastic grocery bag. Inside the bag was an empty can of Vienna sausages, 2 empty water bottles refilled with what I really hope was water, and a toothbrush. A toothbrush. I want to describe what happens in your body in that moment, because it isn't fear exactly, not yet. It's a re-rendering. Every weird little nothing from the past 9 weeks came back at once with the correct explanation attached. The peanut butter, the water at 3 in the morning, the soap, the smell in the hallway, the chair, Otis barking at the roof. It felt physical, a shift in the floor under me. Somebody had built a little charging station in my aunt's basement, and it was tidy, and it was maintained, and the lantern was fully charged, which meant this wasn't left over from some past chapter of the house's life. This was in use. This was current. And my very next thought, God help me, was still trying to save the normal world. I thought maybe it's Carol's. Maybe she kept camping stuff charged down here. 66-year-old Carol, with her ferns and her handwritten notes about the mailman. Even standing over an intruder's toothbrush, part of me was negotiating. I didn't touch anything. I backed out of the basement, shut the door, and stood in the driveway in the August heat with my heart going. Then I did the first genuinely smart thing I'd done all summer, and also, in the same 10 minutes, one of the dumbest. The smart thing was I didn't sleep on it or explain it away. I called my buddy Marcus, who I worked with at the restaurant, and told him what I'd found, mostly because I needed another human to confirm I wasn't losing it. Marcus's reaction calibrated me fast. He didn't laugh. He got quiet, and then he said, "Dude, someone is living in that house with you." Hearing it out loud from someone else made it land in a way it hadn't when it was just circling my own head. The dumb thing was what I did next, which was decide I needed more proof before I called anybody official. I've thought about why a lot. Some of it was embarrassment insurance. I had this vivid picture of Chattanooga PD walking through the house, finding nothing, and me standing there holding a toothbrush in a bag saying, "But the peanut butter, though." Some of it was that the evidence was in the basement, which had its own outside door, and I'd half convinced myself that whoever it was only came into the basement, that they were sneaking in through that basement door to charge a phone and eat sausages, and I just had a trespasser problem, an outside problem. The inside of the house being involved was a possibility I was still keeping in a separate room. And some of it, honestly, was that it was the middle of a bright Saturday afternoon, and fear doesn't hold its shape well in daylight. It felt survivable. It felt manageable. So instead of calling the police, I turned into a detective for 4 days. I'm not proud of this section, but I said I'd tell it straight. First thing, I checked every door and window in the house. Front door, solid, deadbolt worked. Back door off the den, and here's where it got interesting. Because the back door had a deadbolt and a knob lock, and the deadbolt turned but didn't fully seat unless you lifted up on the door while you turned it. Old house, settled frame. If you just flicked the deadbolt like a normal person, it looked locked and felt locked, but the bolt caught on the strike plate at half depth, and a credit card, or a good shove, or honestly a strong opinion, would pop it. I'd been locking that door every night since May. I'd been locking it wrong every night since May, because nobody told me about the lift. Carol knew about the lift. Carol had been lifting that door for 30 years without thinking about it, the way you do in your own house, and it never made it onto her 2 pages of notes. The windows were all painted shut, or locked except 2. The den window with the chipped paint, which I now looked at with completely different eyes, and a small window in the 3rd bedroom, the one Carol used for sewing, which was unlocked behind the curtain and slid open with almost no noise when I tested it. Under that window, outside, the mulch bed was compressed. Not footprints, just mulch that had been stood on more than mulch gets stood on. Second thing, I went up to the attic panel. I didn't go up into the attic. Carol's warning about the ceiling was a good excuse, and I took it. But I cleared the closet shelf and got up on a stepladder and looked at the panel closely with my phone flashlight. The panel was painted the same flat white as the ceiling, and around 2 edges the paint seam was broken. clean hairline gaps where it had been lifted and set back down. On the shelf edge below it, there were gray scuffs, rubber shoe scuffs, on a shelf that held nothing but my winter coats and a sleeping bag. And on the closet door frame, about shoulder height, there was a smudge of insulation dust in the shape of nothing at all, unless you'd just seen the scuffs and the paint seams, in which case it was in the shape of a hand steadying somebody stepping down. I stood on that ladder looking at the panel above my head, and the hallway smell was there again, faint, coming down through the seams, and I finally let the two facts touch each other. The smell in the hallway had never been the closet. It was the attic breathing through the gaps around that panel. It was the smell of the space above the ceiling I slept under, and it was the smell of a person. Third thing, that night, I set what I'm going to generously call traps. A strip of scotch tape across the attic panel seam, up high where you'd never spot it. A pencil line on the peanut butter jar at the level of the peanut butter. The mug money counted to the dollar, $31, and photographed. A tiny fold of paper wedged in the basement door that would drop if the door opened. Kid stuff, tape and pencils, but I wanted proof I could photograph. Something I could hold up so that nobody, including me, could file it under tired college kid again. Then I did the thing I still can't fully explain, which is I stayed in the house that night. Marcus told me to crash at his place, and I said no, because in my head, the danger had office hours. I'd worked out that the activity happened when I was gone or dead asleep, so being home and awake felt weirdly safe. And anyway, I'd decided he came in from outside, through the bad deadbolt or the sewing room window, and I'd locked everything correctly for the first time all summer, lifted the back door and heard the bolt seat all the way, wedged a chair under the knob, locked the sewing window. In my version of events, the house was now sealed and I was alone inside it. I slept 3 hours with the fan off, listening to the house pop and tick, hearing footsteps in every one of them, until my brain surrendered around 4. I want to stop here and address the question everybody asks, the one you're asking. Why didn't you look in the attic? Marcus asked it too. And the honest answer is that I built my whole investigation to avoid having to. Every test I set up was a way to get information about the attic without opening the attic, because at some level below where words happen, I already knew. I knew what the smell was. I knew what the scuffs were. Checking the peanut butter was something I could do in a bright kitchen with the door open behind me. Pushing that panel up and putting my head through into the dark was not, so I found reasons. The loose boards, the ceiling. Carol said not to. If you've never been in a situation where your body knows something your mouth won't say, I'm glad, and I hope you never learn what it's like from the inside. Sunday I worked a double, locked everything the right way, and got home at 11:40 at night. The fold of paper in the basement door hadn't moved. The mug had $31. The pencil line on the peanut butter was clean. The tape on the attic panel was split, not peeled, not fallen off. Split along the seam, half on the panel, half on the frame, the way tape splits when the two things it's bridging move apart. I stood in that closet doorway staring up at it, and the size of it came down on me all at once. Every door and window had been locked right for 24 hours. The perimeter had held. Nothing had come in from outside, and the panel had still moved, and there was only one arrangement of facts that allowed for that. Nothing was getting in. It was already in. It had been in the whole time. The locks had never mattered, not once, all summer, because the thing I was locking out was above the hallway, and while I'd slept those 3 thin hours the night before with a chair under the doorknob, feeling clever, feeling sealed in, I'd sealed it in with me. I didn't sleep in the house that night. I'd love to tell you I made a calm decision, but the truth is, my body made it for me. I grabbed my keys, my laptop, and my work shoes, and I was in the car with the doors locked before I'd finished having the thought. I sat in the driveway for a minute looking at the house, every window dark, the porch light I'd left on. It looked exactly like it had looked all summer, which was the worst part. It had looked like this the whole time. I drove to Marcus's apartment off Rossville Boulevard and told him about the tape, and he said the correct thing, which was, "You're calling the police right now." and I finally agreed, with one adjustment that I'll defend to anybody. I didn't call 911 because nobody was in danger at that exact moment, me being on his futon and all. I called Carol first. It was her house, it was midnight, and I woke her up in Sarasota, and I'm glad I did, because that phone call changed what kind of story this is. I laid it all out. The food, the water at night, the smell, the chargers behind the water heater, the toothbrush, the scuffs, the tape. Long stretch of quiet on her end. And then Carol, who I expected to gasp or tell me to slow down, said something in a flat voice I'd never heard her use. She said, "Is the bag behind the water heater a Food City bag?" I said yes. And she said, "Oh no." And then she told me about Dale. Around 2010, after her divorce, money was tight, and Carol did the thing a lot of people in old streetcar neighborhoods do. She rented out a room. 3rd bedroom, the sewing room. Put an ad on Craigslist and rented it to a man named Dale Prentice, late 30s then, who worked stocking overnight at a grocery warehouse. She described him as quiet to a fault, paid cash, on time, first 15 months, kept his room neat, ate the same things constantly, canned meat, peanut butter, white bread, said it was his stomach. Barely spoke, but when he did he was polite, and he was handy, fixed her disposal once without being asked. She said the only strange thing early on was how you'd forget he was in the house. She'd think she was home alone, and he'd be in the den the whole time, or she'd hear water run at night and it was just Dale, and she trained herself to stop noticing. Her exact words were, "I taught myself not to hear him." She said it and then went quiet, because we both understood what that meant for my summer. Second year, it went bad slowly. He lost the warehouse job, or left it. He was never clear. Rent got late, then partial, then a story instead of money. He stopped leaving the house much. Carol started finding him in rooms he had no reason to be in, standing in the kitchen in the dark at 2 a.m, and once, and she was crying a little when she told me this part, she woke up because her bedroom door, which she kept shut, was standing open, and she never proved anything, and he swore the AC pressure did it, and she let herself believe that because the alternative had nowhere to go. In the spring of 2013, she gave him 60 days' notice, in writing, terrified the whole time for reasons she said she couldn't have written down. He didn't argue. On day 58, he left with 2 duffel bags. He gave her the key back, put it in her hand on the porch, and said thank you for everything. And she said the relief when his taillights turned off the street was the strongest feeling she'd had in years. She changed exactly nothing about the house. Same locks. Never occurred to her, she said. He gave the key back, as if a key is a thing that can't be copied for $3 at the hardware store he walked past every day for 2 years. As if a man who lived in a house for 26 months wouldn't know about a backdoor deadbolt you have to lift, and a sewing room window that never locked right, and a plywood panel in the hallway closet, above which ran 40 feet of attic that nobody, in all the years Carol had lived there, ever had a reason to enter. And here's the detail that reframed everything, the one that told me how long this had really been happening. I asked Carol when she'd last seen him, expecting years ago. She said, February, 5 months back, in the Food City on Broad Street, the one I'd been buying my groceries at all summer. She said he looked rough, heavier, gray in his beard, jacket too big. She said hello because that's who she is, and he was polite, quiet, same as ever. Asked if she was still on the same street. She said yes, and that was the whole conversation. And she came home and forgot about it, because why would you remember it? Police would later find that Dale had been evicted from a boarding house on Rossville in late March, and after that his official address was nowhere. His unofficial address, as far as anyone could reconstruct, became the attic of the house he knew better than anyone alive, empty and dark all day once I started working. Owned by a woman whose habit of not hearing him he had personally spent 2 years installing. He hadn't followed anybody or cased anything. He'd just come home. Carol told me to call the police that minute and to not go back inside for anything. And then she called them too, from Florida, so the report had the owner's voice on it from the start. I called the non-emergency line at about 1 a.m, and told the whole thing to a dispatcher who, credit where it's due, did not treat me like a stoned college kid. 2 officers met me at the house at 8 the next morning, Monday. I walked them through it. Basement first. The power strip and chargers were exactly where I'd left them. The tape on the attic panel split. The scuffs. One of the officers, an older guy, looked at the setup behind the water heater for a while and then looked at me and said, "And you've been staying here?" Not sarcastic, almost gentle. It's the closest I came to losing it that whole morning. Then they cleared the shelf, and the younger officer went up on the stepladder and pushed the panel, and it lifted with no resistance at all. Light, loose in its frame, a panel that had been lifted 1,000 times, and he put his flashlight and then his head through the hole. The attic was empty. He walked the plywood the whole length, careful over the loose boards, all the way to where the roof came down over the den, and shone the light into the crawl space at the end, and came back down with insulation dust on his shoulders and a strange look, and said, "There's nobody up there, but somebody has been." He'd seen the walkway swept clean of dust in a track down the middle. He'd seen, in the crawl space over the den, wedged back where the roof met the ceiling joists, what he described as bedding. But no Dale, and it was Monday morning, and it took me a second to get it, and then I did. Monday morning. I'd left Sunday for a double shift and then gone straight to Marcus's. The car had been out of the driveway for close to 24 hours. As far as the attic knew, the pattern said the house was his right now. He wasn't up there because he was down here, somewhere, out in the daylight world doing whatever he did in it, and at some point, that evening or the next, he was going to come up the back steps or through the sewing room window with a Food City bag, planning to climb back into the ceiling of a house that had police tape on the basement door. Except there wasn't going to be police tape. The older officer was clear about that. Nobody in custody, nobody in the house, no crime in progress. They'd take the report, photograph everything, collect the chargers, and step up patrols on the block. If I wanted him caught rather than spooked, the officer said, the house had to look normal, and somebody had to know the second he came back. He didn't love the next part, and neither did I. The best sensor available was me, in the house, living the routine, with a phone in my hand. I want to be accurate about what was actually arranged, because I've seen enough of these stories where the police run a movie-style stakeout, and that's not what happened, because that's not a thing that happens for a trespassing report with no suspect on scene. What happened was smaller and shakier. The report went in with Dale Prentice named in it, which mattered, because it turned out there was already an active warrant on him. Failure to appear on a shoplifting charge from April. Groceries, by the way. He'd been caught walking out of a store with canned meat and batteries. So the warrant upgraded everything. Patrol would swing through the block a few times a night. I had the direct number of the older officer, Whitfield, in my phone. Carol, on her end, called the alarm company first thing and paid for a rush install, but the earliest they could come was Thursday. It was Monday, so the actual plan, the real one, was this. I'd stay in the house evenings with the lights in the car in the driveway doing their usual routine, keep every entrance locked correctly, and sleep at Marcus's, leaving after dark with the porch light on so the house never obviously emptied out. If anything at all moved, I called. Monday night, nothing. I sat in that living room until 11 with the TV low, hearing every single sound the house made, and I can tell you that knowing what the sounds might be is so much worse than not knowing. Every tick of the ductwork had a body attached to it now. At 11:15 I left, and I did not sleep at Marcus's either. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday, my night off, I stayed later, until almost 1, because patrol had told Whitfield the block had been quiet, and part of me had started doing the thing again, the negotiating. Maybe the cops in the basement Monday spooked him from a distance. Maybe he saw the cruiser and he's gone. Maybe this is already over. I was actually feeling loose enough that I fell asleep on the couch with the TV on. That's the state I was in at 12:40 in the morning, on Thursday the 8th of August, when the attic access panel in the hallway closet came open. Here's what I didn't know. The closet door was shut, so I didn't hear the panel itself. What I heard, what woke me, was the closet shelf. The shelf took his weight with a specific crack of wood, one sharp sound from down the hall, and I came off that couch with my heart already at a sprint before my eyes were open. The TV was still going. I muted it, and the house went to pure silence, and I stood in the middle of Carol's living room in my socks, staring down the dark hallway at the closed closet door, telling myself it was the house. It's an old house. Old houses pop, and then the closet doorknob turned. I watched it turn. There's a version of me that grabbed a knife or a lamp or did anything at all useful, and then there's the real version, who stood frozen while the door opened and a man stepped out of the closet into the hallway of the house I was standing in. The hallway was dark, and the living room had the TV glow, so I could see him better than he could see me, for 1 second. He was big, not tall, wide, heavy through the shoulders, in a dark t-shirt, and moving carefully, quiet for his size, the way a man moves who has done this exact thing many times. And he took 1 step toward the kitchen, his usual route, I guess, and then he saw me. We looked at each other for a length of time I genuinely cannot estimate. Somewhere between 1 second and the rest of my life. The single detail I can give you, the one that's still there when I close my eyes, is that he didn't look scared, and he didn't look angry. He looked interrupted. Mildly, politely interrupted. A man whose kitchen you'd wandered into. And then he said the only words I ever heard him say in person, in a low voice, totally calm. And what he said was, "I thought you left." Not a threat. Worse, an expectation. He knew my schedule. He'd been the one keeping track of me. What broke the freeze was my phone, which was in my hand because I'd fallen asleep holding it, and I looked down at it, one dumb, reflexive glance, and when I looked up he was coming down the hallway at me. Fast. No wind-up, no shout, just instant forward motion, and I ran. Front door, deadbolt, thank God a normal deadbolt, and I was out and off the porch and into the middle of Tremont Street in my socks, screaming for help at 1 a.m. in a way I didn't know my voice could do, dialing 911 at a dead run. Porch lights started coming on, Mr. Hensley's first. The dispatcher had a cruiser that was already on the block for the extra patrols. And I will tell you that the 50-some seconds before those headlights swung onto the street were the longest of my life, standing in the road, watching Carol's front door hanging open and the dark inside it, having no idea if he was 10 feet behind me or gone. He was neither. He'd gone back up. That's the part that took everyone a minute to believe. He didn't run out the back door into the alleys and the train tracks, which he'd have known better than anybody. When officers cleared the house, the back door was still locked, lifted and seated, the windows shut, and the attic panel was closed above the closet shelf. The man's entire understanding of that house, of his own safety, lived up there. Under pressure, he did the thing that had worked for 4 months. He climbed back into the ceiling and pulled the lid on and went still. It didn't work, because this time everybody knew where to look. More units came, and around 2 a.m, an officer went partway up through the panel with a light, while 2 more stood in the yard watching the roof vents, and they talked him out. It took a while. Whitfield told me later he was all the way back in the crawl space over the den, wedged in behind the ductwork in a space 3 feet tall, in August, where the temperature that night was probably over 120 degrees, and that when he finally crawled the length of the attic and came down through the closet, hands first, soaked through and gray with insulation, cuffed in the hallway 6 feet from where he'd said, "I thought you left," he was calm, completely calm. He asked if he could get his things from upstairs. Upstairs. That's the word he used for it. I watched them walk Dale Prentice out of my aunt's front door from across the street, standing in the Braes yard in my socks with a blanket somebody's wife had draped over me. And Otis the beagle, losing his mind at the end of his leash, finally vindicated. And the last I saw of Dale was the top of his head as they folded him into the car. 51 years old, it turned out. He never looked at me. What they brought down from the attic the next day took 2 contractor bags and a written inventory, and this is the part where I found out what my summer had actually been. In the crawl space over the den, laid across the ceiling joists on a base of flattened cardboard boxes, was a full living setup. A sleeping bag and 2 moving blankets. A foam camp pad. A backpack of clothes, folded. A battery lantern, twinned to the one in the basement, and a little battery fan clipped to a rafter, which raised the obvious question. Because a fan doesn't make a closed Tennessee attic in August survivable, nothing does. That space had to be pushing 140 degrees by midday. The answer, the detectives figured, was that he mostly wasn't up there during the day. The attic was where he slept and where he hid. The daytime hours, especially that stretch when I was pulling doubles and gone 17 hours at a time, he spent down in the house, in the 74-degree air conditioning I was keeping running for him. And he went up through the panel at night before I got home, or the second a car turned into the driveway. He wasn't surviving the attic. He was renting it and living in my house. There were 2 bags of trash up there, packed neat, empty cans, bread bags, 2 of my granola bar boxes, and a peanut butter jar, not the current one, an older one, finished and cleaned. 2 bags, for 4 months of eating, which didn't add up until Whitfield worked it out. He was carrying his trash out with him during the day, a bag at a time, dropping it in the dumpster behind the shops on St. Elmo Avenue. Or, and this one made me feel sick in a whole new way, in the neighbors' bins on Tuesday nights after they rolled them to the curb. He didn't just live there. He took out the garbage, a gallon jug of water, a phone, charged, with a cracked screen, Carol's expired painkillers, that empty prescription bottle from the medicine cabinet, in his backpack, a spiral notebook. I'm not going to pretend I read the notebook because I didn't. It went into evidence. But Whitfield told Carol the parts that mattered for the case. And Carol told me one of them, and I'll pass it along and then never think about it again. It wasn't a diary. It was mostly lists, dates and times, in careful handwriting. My schedule, when my car left, when it came back, which nights were restaurant nights and which were warehouse nights, written out over weeks, corrected where I'd changed shifts. The line Carol repeated to me, the one entry that was more than logistics, was from sometime in July. It said, "Kid keeps it at 74 like she did." The physical evidence put the start of it in early April, well before I moved in. Best guess, he'd had the run of the empty house for almost 2 months, sleeping wherever he wanted. And when I showed up at the end of May, he didn't leave. He compressed, moved fully into the attic and the schedule of my absences, and lived above my head for 70-some nights, coming down while I was at work or asleep behind that box fan, eating measured amounts, washing at the bathroom sink at 3 in the morning, putting the soap back in the dish. The detectives found the copied key, by the way. It was on him when he was arrested, on a ring with 2 others, and it fit the back door. He'd had it the whole time. The window and the deadbolt trick were just for the nights the key felt risky. Or that's the theory. Nobody ever really got answers. Because Dale, true to everything, barely spoke. Here's the ending, and I'll keep it short because it was short. The warrant meant he stayed in custody from that night on. Between the burglary counts, the prior, and everything in that notebook, his lawyer wasn't excited to see a jury. And in January of 2020, he pleaded guilty to aggravated criminal trespass and 2 counts of burglary. He got 4 years. With the way sentences actually work, he served a little over 2, and he's out now somewhere, with conditions that he stay out of Hamilton County and away from Carol and me. As far as I know, he has. Carol flew back that same week in August. She stood in the hallway looking up at the closet ceiling for a long time, and then she had the attic panel screwed shut with 8 3-inch screws, which we both knew was for the feeling and not the physics. And the locks changed that day, and the alarm went in Thursday the way it was always going to, 4 days too late. She stuck it out in the house for 1 more year and couldn't do it. Said the house never sounded right to her again, and she'd lived there 40 years, so she'd know. She sold it last October to a young couple from Atlanta who were told, because the law required it exactly 0. But Carol told them anyway, everything. They bought it anyway. Housing market. I finished my senior year. I live in Nashville now. 3rd floor apartment. No attic. No crawl space. A ceiling with nothing above it but another guy's floor. And I picked it for that reason, and I don't care how that sounds. And I check. That's the one thing that followed me out of that house. Wherever I stay, first night, I find the access panel. Every house has one. and I look at the paint seam around the edges, and I make sure it's unbroken, and then I can sleep. Because for 70 nights I lay in bed listening to an old house pop and creak, and told myself that's just what houses do. Some of those sounds were the house. Some of them weren't. I'll never know which were which, and neither will you about yours. Anyway, check your paint seams. I knew something was wrong with the cabin when I woke up and saw the kitchen chair pulled out. Not tipped over, not moved across the room, just pulled out from the little round table by maybe 2 feet, angled toward the hallway, like somebody had been sitting there while we slept. I stared at it for a while before I said anything. My boyfriend Ryan was still asleep beside me, face down with one arm hanging off the bed. It was barely light outside. That gray morning light was coming through the cheap blinds, and I could hear rain hitting the leaves outside the window. At first, I tried to explain it away in the dumbest possible way. Maybe I had left it like that. Maybe Ryan had gotten up during the night. Maybe one of us bumped it when we came in from dinner. But I remembered pushing both chairs in before bed, because the cabin was small, and that table was right in the walkway between the kitchen and bedroom. I remembered doing it because Ryan had laughed and said, "You really can't relax, can you?" I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. The chair legs had made faint scrape marks on the wood floor. Not deep marks, just those pale lines you get when furniture drags across old flooring. Our cooler was still against the wall. The front door was still locked. The little chain lock was still hooked. The sliding back door was locked too. I checked it twice. Then I noticed the thermostat. We had set it to 68 before bed because the cabin had that damp mountain smell, and we wanted the heat to kick on a little. It was set to 74. I stood there looking at it, and that was the first time I got that heavy feeling in my stomach. Ryan came out a minute later, scratching his head, half asleep. I asked him if he had gotten up. He said, no. I asked him if he had touched the thermostat. He looked at it and said, "Why would I set it to 74? That was enough to make me feel weird, but not enough to pack up and leave. Not yet. That's the part people always judge when they hear stories like this. They think they would leave right away. Maybe they would. I don't know. But when you're actually standing there in your socks on the first morning of a trip you already paid for, your brain starts working against you. You start trying to make everything normal. The cabin was outside Gatlinburg, not deep in the woods or anything, but far enough up a road that had no streetlights. It was one of those small one-bedroom rentals that looks cute in photos, because the photographer knows how to hide how close everything is. Wood walls, little gas fireplace, old couch, tiny kitchen, hot tub on the back deck, mountain-themed signs everywhere. The listing said it was private. It said secluded. It was not really secluded. There was another cabin down the slope, but the trees blocked most of it. From the front porch, all you could see was gravel driveway, wet leaves, and the road curving down through the woods. The host's name on the app was Dale. His picture showed a smiling older guy in a baseball cap standing in front of a lake. He had a lot of reviews. Most were fine. Clean place, great location, cozy cabin, good communication. There were a few that I remembered only after everything happened. One said the cabin made weird noises at night. One said they felt watched, but blamed it on being city people. One said the host was almost too responsive. At the time, I thought those were just picky people being dramatic. That first morning, Ryan messaged Dale and said the thermostat seemed to have reset itself overnight. He didn't mention the chair because I asked him not to. I didn't want to sound crazy. Dale responded in less than a minute. "Old cabin. Thermostat has a mind of its own sometimes. I can swing by later if needed." Ryan showed me the message and shrugged. I said, "Don't have him swing by." Ryan laughed a little and said, "Okay, he won't swing by." We went into Gatlinburg that day. We did the normal tourist stuff. Breakfast, walking around, buying candy we didn't need. It rained off and on. I tried to forget about the chair, and for a few hours I did. When we got back to the cabin around 6, I noticed something else. One of my hair ties was on the bathroom sink. That sounds like nothing, and honestly, I hated myself for even caring. But I had put that hair tie on the nightstand before we left. I knew because I had taken it off in bed the night before, and it had gotten caught around the little lamp switch. I remembered untangling it. Now it was on the sink, sitting beside Ryan's toothbrush. I picked it up and held it for a second. Ryan was unloading a bag of snacks in the kitchen. I said, "Did you move this?" He said, "Move what?" "My hair tie." "No." I said, "It was by the bed." He gave me that look people give when they want to be supportive but don't want to encourage you. He said, "Maybe it stuck to your clothes or something." That made enough sense that I accepted it, even though I didn't believe it. We made dinner in the cabin because neither of us felt like going back out. It got dark early because of the rain. By 8, the windows were black and every sound outside felt closer than it should have. That was when we heard the cough. It came from under us, not outside, not from the deck, not from the neighboring cabin, under the floor. It was a short, wet cough, one sound, then silence. Ryan froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. I looked at him and whispered, "You heard that?" He nodded. We sat there listening. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped on the roof. The cabin creaked a little, the way cabins do. Nothing else happened. Ryan got up and walked around the kitchen, putting his ear near the floor. I said, "Don't." He said, "It's probably pipes." I said, "Pipes don't cough." He didn't answer. He went to the front door, opened it, and stepped onto the porch. I followed, but stayed inside the doorway. He shined his phone light toward the side of the cabin. There was nothing but wet dirt, leaves, and the black open space under the deck stairs. The cabin sat on a slope, so the front was close to the ground, but the back was raised. You could see lattice around the lower part, the cheap kind that hides crawl spaces. I had noticed it when we arrived, but I didn't think about it. Ryan walked to the side of the porch and shined his light down. "Hello?" he called. I hated that. I hated how loud his voice sounded and how fast the woods swallowed it. No one answered. He came back in and locked the door. For the rest of the night, we kept the TV on, not because we were watching it, just because silence felt worse. Around 10, I messaged Dale myself. I wrote, "Hi, we heard what sounded like coughing, or maybe an animal under the cabin. Is there a crawl space or anything? Just wanted to check." He answered almost immediately. "Probably raccoons. They get under there sometimes when it rains. Nothing to worry about. I'll have pest control look after your stay." That bothered me. Not because of what he said, but because of how fast he said it. He didn't ask what side of the cabin. He didn't ask if we wanted him to check. He just explained it away and told us it would be handled after we left. Ryan said that was normal. Hosts don't want to deal with stuff unless they have to. I said, why wouldn't he tell us there might be raccoons under the cabin before we booked? Ryan said, because then nobody would book it. He had a point, but it did not make me feel better. We slept badly. I don't think either of us said we were scared, but we both acted like we were. Ryan put his duffel bag in front of the bedroom door, even though the cabin didn't have a separate bedroom door, just a sliding barn-style thing that didn't lock. I kept waking up and checking the corner where the hallway met the kitchen. At some point in the night, I heard the floor creak. Not a random house sound. A slow creak under the bed, then another one near the wall. I held my breath so long my chest hurt. Ryan whispered, "You awake?" I whispered, "Yes." We lay there listening. The sound didn't happen again. In the morning, our leftover pizza was out on the counter. We had put it in the fridge. Both of us remembered putting it in the fridge because Ryan had joked that cold pizza would be breakfast. The box was open. One slice was missing. That was it for me. I said, "We're leaving." Ryan didn't argue. He didn't joke. He just nodded and started packing. I went into the bathroom to grab my makeup bag, and that was when I noticed the vent cover. It was on the wall close to the floor, beside the sink, one of those rectangular return vents. I had noticed it before, but now one screw was sticking out farther than the others. The bottom corner of the vent wasn't flush with the wall. I crouched down and touched it. It moved. The whole cover shifted a little. I said, "Ryan." He came in holding his hoodie. I pointed at the vent. He said, "What?" I pulled it gently. It came away from the wall with almost no effort. Behind it was not ductwork. Behind it was a dark, empty space. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then Ryan got down on one knee and turned on his phone flashlight. The beam hit unfinished wood, dirt, and some kind of narrow opening that went back behind the bathroom wall. Not big enough for a grown person to walk through, but big enough to crawl through. I backed away so fast I hit the tub. Ryan said very quietly, "Get your shoes." That scared me more than if he had yelled. I went to the bedroom and grabbed my boots with my hands shaking so hard I could barely get them on. Ryan was still crouched by the vent. He leaned closer, then jerked back. I said, "What?" He said, "There's a cord." I said, "What do you mean?" He reached in and pulled out a white phone charger. It was plugged into an extension cord that ran back into the darkness. That was the moment everything stopped feeling like a weird cabin and started feeling dangerous. Ryan stood up and said, "We're going now." We didn't pack neatly. We shoved clothes into bags. I left shampoo in the shower. Ryan left food in the fridge. I grabbed my purse, my phone, and my keys, and we headed for the front door. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Dale. "Everything okay over there?" I read it once and felt my whole body go cold. Ryan asked, "What?" I showed him. He looked at the message, then looked around the cabin like the walls had changed. Neither of us had messaged him that morning. We hadn't called him. We hadn't opened the app since the night before. I whispered, "How does he know?" Ryan didn't answer. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. The chain lock was still hooked. The deadbolt was locked. He opened both, and we stepped onto the porch. The gravel driveway was empty except for our car. For 1 second, I felt stupidly relieved. Then Ryan stopped. The hood of our car was wet from rain, but the driver's side door handle had a clean smear on it, like someone had recently touched it and wiped rain away with their hand. Ryan unlocked the car from the porch. The lights flashed. We ran to it. I got in and locked the doors before Ryan even had his seatbelt on. He started the car and backed down the driveway too fast, gravel popping under the tires. I kept looking at the cabin. Nothing moved in the windows. No one came out. But right as the cabin disappeared behind the trees, I saw the lattice under the back deck shift. Just one panel. It pushed outward maybe an inch, then settled back. I said, "Drive." Ryan said, "I am." We didn't stop until we got to a gas station on the main road. It was one of those places with a subway inside and bright lights that make everything feel less insane. I got out of the car and immediately started crying. Not loud, just that shaky kind where you can't get a full breath. Ryan called the police. At first I could tell the dispatcher thought we were reporting a bad rental experience. Ryan kept saying, "No, someone is inside the crawl space. There is a charger under the bathroom wall. Food was moved. The host messaged us when we found it." That got their attention. An officer met us at the gas station about 20 minutes later. He was calm, which helped a little. He asked us what happened from the beginning. We told him about the chair, the thermostat, the hair tie, the cough, the pizza, the vent, the charger, and Dale's message. When I said the name Dale, the officer asked for the listing. Ryan showed him the Airbnb page. The officer looked at the host photo for a few seconds, then asked, "This the person you've been messaging?" We said yes. He didn't say anything right away. He just took down the address and told us to stay at the gas station. I asked if we could go with him, because some part of me still wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. He said no, stay here. So we stayed. I remember every minute of that wait. I remember the smell of hot bread from the subway. I remember an older couple buying lottery tickets. I remember Ryan standing by the window with his arms crossed, staring out at the parking lot. I remember refreshing the Airbnb app over and over, even though there was nothing new. After maybe 45 minutes, my phone buzzed again. "Dale. You leave something?" I dropped the phone on the table. Ryan picked it up and read it. Then another message came in. "You should have told me you were checking out early." Ryan took a screenshot and called the officer back. The officer answered and told him not to respond. That was the first time I heard yelling through a phone that wasn't on speaker. It was faint, but I heard it. A man yelling in the background. Then the officer said, "We'll come to you when we're done." That made me sick. We waited almost 2 hours. Eventually, 2 police cars pulled into the gas station. The same officer came inside with another one. They asked us to sit down. He told us they found a man under the cabin, not outside it, under it. There was a crawlspace access panel behind the lattice on the downhill side, partially hidden behind stacked firewood. Inside, there was a narrow path under the cabin that led to the bathroom wall and part of the bedroom wall. The vent cover in the bathroom had been modified so it could be removed from the other side. There was a sleeping bag, bottled water, snack wrappers, a flashlight, a bucket, an extension cord, and a small space heater. There was also a tablet. The officer didn't tell us everything on it right away. He just said there were notes about guests, guest names, check-in dates, which cars they drove, what time they usually left, what time they came back, stuff like that. Ryan asked if it was Dale. The officer said yes, but not the Dale from the host photo. That photo was of the actual owner's brother, who had died a few years earlier. The man messaging us was named Dale, but he was not the cheerful guy in the picture. He was the owner's cousin, and he had been helping manage the property on and off. The actual owner lived out of state, and apparently didn't know Dale had been staying there between bookings. Then the officer said something that still makes my skin crawl. He wasn't just staying there between bookings. I already knew that. We both did. But hearing it said plainly made it real. The officer told us Dale had a key to the cabin, but from what they could tell, he usually didn't use it while guests were there because it was too risky. He used the crawl space instead. He could listen through the vents. He could reach the bathroom wall. He had access to a small gap behind the kitchen lower cabinets where he could push one cabinet panel loose from the back. That explained the pizza. He didn't walk into the kitchen like a normal person. He reached in from behind the cabinet. That detail messed me up more than almost anything else. The idea of us sitting 10 feet away watching TV while a hand came through the back of a cabinet and took food from our fridge or counter made me feel physically ill. They also found a small camera. The officer was careful when he told us. He said it was not in the bedroom or bathroom. It was placed outside under the back deck, pointed at the hot tub area. We had not used the hot tub because of the rain, which I still think about. The camera was connected to a battery pack and hidden behind a support beam. Ryan asked if there were more cameras. The officer said they were checking. I asked if he had been inside while we slept. The officer said they didn't know yet. I said, "The chair was moved." He didn't answer for a second. Then he said, "We're documenting everything." That was enough of an answer. They took our statements. We handed over screenshots. We showed them the messages. They asked if we wanted someone to escort us back to get our things. But I said no before Ryan could even look at me. I never wanted to see that cabin again. The owner called us later that night, not Dale, the actual owner. She was crying. She kept saying she didn't know. She kept saying he was family and had helped with maintenance. She said he wasn't supposed to stay there. She said she was sorry. I believed that she was sorry. I did not care. Airbnb refunded us. They paid for a hotel for the night, though we barely slept there either. Ryan pushed a chair under the hotel room door handle, and I checked every vent in the room, even the ones near the ceiling that no person could ever fit through. The next morning, we drove home. For a few days, I kept expecting Dale to message again. I blocked him in the app, but I still felt like my phone was waiting to buzz. I kept thinking about him under the floor while we walked around barefoot. I kept thinking about that cough. I kept thinking about how he knew we were leaving. The police contacted us a few more times. They said Dale had been charged with several things, including burglary and unlawful surveillance. I don't remember the exact wording of all of it. I remember asking if he had done this to other guests. The detective said they were contacting previous renters. That answer told me enough. A few weeks later, Ryan found one of the old reviews from that cabin. It had been buried under all the positive ones. It was from a woman who stayed there with her sister. She wrote that they heard a man clearing his throat under the floor, but assumed it was sound traveling from the neighboring cabin. Another guest said their leftovers went missing and joked that the cabin had a snack ghost. Someone else said the host seemed to know they had used the hot tub even though they never mentioned it. Those reviews are gone now. The whole listing is gone. I don't know what happened to the owner. I don't know if she sold the cabin or still has it. I don't know if Dale ever admitted to anything beyond what police found. I don't know how many people slept above him without knowing. I do know he was there with us. He was there the first night when the chair moved. He was there when the heat changed. He was there when my hair tie moved from the bedroom to the bathroom. He was there when we heard coughing under the floor, and when we found the vent, he knew. That is the part I still can't get past. Not the crawl space, not the charger, not even the camera. It's the message. Everything okay over there? He sent that because he knew we had found something. We were not being paranoid. We were not hearing old house noises. We were not making each other nervous for no reason. There was a man under the cabin, listening to us figure it out. I've been driving trucks for going on 6 years. Started when I was 22, right after I got out of the army. Most people hear that and assume I drove fuelers or something overseas, but I was a mechanic. I just wanted something where I could be on my own and not have anybody in my face all day, and trucking checked both boxes. I run a regular route. Pick up out of a distribution center in Salt Lake City, drop in Omaha, deadhead back, or grab whatever load they've got going west. Interstate 80 straight through Wyoming and Nebraska. I'd been doing that same lane for almost 3 years. When you run the same road that many times, you get to know it. You know which rest areas have working showers. You know which exits have decent food. You know which truck stops are clean and which ones you don't want to walk through after dark. There was a diner I used to stop at off Interstate 80 in Wyoming, maybe 45 minutes east of Cheyenne. Open all night. Coffee was good. There was a waitress on the overnight shift named Joanne, and she always saved me a slice of pie if she knew I was coming through. This was August of 2022. I remember because my niece had just turned 4, and I'd missed her birthday party, and I was running myself ragged trying to get east in time to swing by my sister's place on the way back. I rolled into that diner at 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are slow on that stretch. Wyoming in the middle of the night, you might pass 2 other trucks in an hour. The parking lot had my rig and one other pickup, and that was it. Pickup was a dark blue Ford F-150, older model, maybe early 2000s, had Wyoming plates. I didn't think anything of it. I went in and sat at the counter. Joanne wasn't working that night. Different waitress, older lady, didn't catch her name. I ordered a coffee and the chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes. There was one other person in the place, a guy sitting in a booth by the window. I noticed him because he was the only one in there besides me, and because when I sat down he was already looking at me. I'm going to describe him as best I can remember. Maybe 45, 50. White guy. Brown hair, longer than it should have been, kind of greasy. He had a beard that wasn't really a beard, more like he just hadn't shaved in a week or two. He was wearing a Carhartt jacket, the brown kind, even though it was August, and probably still 70 degrees outside. Boots, jeans. He looked like 100 other guys you'd see in any truck stop in the country, except for the way he was looking at me. I want to say something about that. I've been driving for 6 years. I am a woman. I'm 28 and I'm 5'4". I have been looked at. I've had guys whistle at me at fuel islands. I've had drunks at truck stops try to talk to me when I'm just trying to get to the shower. I've had dispatchers say things on the phone they shouldn't have said. I know what it feels like to be looked at as a woman. This wasn't that. He wasn't checking me out. He was watching me. He was studying me. He was working something out in his head, and he was taking his time doing it. He had a menu open in front of him, but in the whole time I was in there, I never once saw him look at it. The waitress brought my food. I ate. I had my phone out and I was scrolling through it, but I was watching him in my peripheral vision the entire time. He didn't order anything. The waitress came over to him twice and both times he waved her off. He had a coffee cup, but I don't think he ever drank from it. I ate maybe half my steak. I wasn't really hungry anymore. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. I kept telling myself that he was probably just some weirdo who was high or had a head injury or didn't know how to act around women, and he was going to finish whatever he was doing and leave. I kept telling myself that. I also kept watching him. At one point he moved seats. The booth he was in had benches on both sides, and he switched from the bench facing the door to the bench facing me. He did it casually. Stood up, took his coat, slid around to the other side, sat back down. Now he could see me straight on. The menu was still open in front of him. That's when I knew. I'd like to tell you that I had some big plan after that, but I didn't. I just decided I was leaving. I waved the waitress over. I asked for the check. She brought it. I put cash on the counter, $22. Told her to keep the change. I got up and I walked out. I want to tell you something about how I was thinking right then. I wasn't scared exactly. I was alert. There's a difference. Scared is when your hands shake. Alert is when everything goes quiet in your head and you're just paying attention. I'd been alert since about 3 minutes after I sat down. I walked out to my truck and I didn't run. I made myself walk normal. I climbed up into the cab, locked the door, and I sat there to see what he was going to do. He came out maybe 45 seconds later. Walked to his pickup. Got in. Didn't start it. I started my engine and pulled out of the parking lot. There was a Pilot a couple miles down the road, and I'd been planning to fuel up there before the diner stop, but I'd been low on coffee and decided to eat first. So now I needed diesel. I pulled out onto the access road and got on the on-ramp heading east. Within about 30 seconds, I saw headlights behind me. He'd pulled out too. I told myself this didn't mean anything. There's one road. He's going east. I'm going east. That's how interstates work. I took the exit for the Pilot 2 miles up. He took it too. I pulled into the truck side of the lot, into the fuel island. 3 big rigs over from me, there was another driver fueling up. An older guy I'd seen in there before but didn't really know. I gave him a nod. He nodded back. I got down to start fueling. And that's when I saw the blue pickup pull around the back of the truck island and park 3 pumps over from me. He didn't get out. He just sat there with the engine running. Everything in my stomach dropped, because there's no reason for a pickup to park at the truck fuel island. The car pumps were on the other side of the building, maybe 100 yards away. He'd driven past them to come over here. There was no reason to be where he was unless he was watching me. I finished pulling the diesel handle out and set it in the pump. I climbed back up into my cab. I locked the door. I picked up my CB. I need to explain something about CBs. Most truckers don't really use them anymore. Everybody's got cell phones. Everybody's got their own thing going. The CB is more of a backup, or a way to talk to other drivers on the road if there's an accident up ahead or whatever. But every trucker monitors channel 19 out of habit. Including, I figured, anybody who used to drive and now drives a pickup and hangs out at truck stops at 2:30 in the morning. That was a guess, but it felt like a good guess. I keyed up the mic and I said, "Hey Bobby, you copy?" Nothing, because there is no Bobby. I said, "Bobby, this is Kelly. You copy? I'm at the Pilot off exit 359. I'm fueling up. Where you at?" I waited about 10 seconds, and then I keyed up again, and I made my voice do the thing where you pretend you're answering somebody on the other end. I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll wait here for you. How far back you?" Pause. "Okay, 15 minutes. That's fine. I'll grab a coffee inside. There's some weirdo been following me from the 80 diner. I'll point him out when you get here. Blue F-150, Wyoming plates, 3 pumps over from me right now." I put the mic down. I sat in my cab and I watched him in my mirror. He sat there for maybe 20 seconds. Then his reverse lights came on. He backed out of the pump space. He pulled around the front of the building and got back on the access road heading east. Didn't fuel up. Didn't go inside. Didn't do anything except leave. There was no Bobby. I don't know anybody named Bobby. I made him up. I got his plate as he pulled around. Wyoming plate. I wrote it down on the back of a receipt. Then I sat in my truck for another 10 minutes to make sure he wasn't coming back, and I finished fueling. I went inside the Pilot and I asked the cashier if I could use their phone. I called the Wyoming State Highway Patrol. I told them what happened. I gave them the plate. I gave them my name and my CDL number and my company and where I'd be for the next several hours. The dispatcher told me they'd run it and call me back. I bought a coffee and I sat in the booth nearest the window where I could see my truck and the parking lot. I called my own dispatcher on my cell and told her I might be sitting at this Pilot for a while. She told me to do whatever I needed to do. About 40 minutes later, the cashier waved me over, State Patrol on the phone. The trooper on the other end said the plate came back to a man named Dennis Wayne Holcomb, 47 years old, address in Casper. Had 2 open warrants out of Nebraska. One was for aggravated assault on a female, an ex-girlfriend, from 2019. The other was for failure to appear on the same charge. They were considered active. He asked me to stay where I was. They were sending a trooper to take a statement. The trooper got there about an hour later. Younger guy, polite. Took my statement in the booth. Wrote down everything I said. Asked me to describe Dennis Holcomb. Asked me to walk through everything that happened from the moment I sat down at the diner to the moment the pickup pulled out of the Pilot. He told me they'd put out a be on the lookout for the truck on the eastbound lanes of 80. I got back on the road around 5 in the morning. I drove with the CB on the whole way to Nebraska. I didn't hear anything for 2 days. I'd finished my Omaha drop, picked up a return load, and was headed back west when I got a call from a number with a Wyoming area code. It was a different trooper this time. He told me they'd picked Dennis Wayne Holcomb up at a way station outside Sidney, Nebraska, about 6 hours after I'd called it in. He was driving the same Ford F-150. He had a handgun in the glove box that he wasn't legally allowed to have because of his felony record. He had zip ties in the center console. He had a roll of duct tape in the back seat. And he had what the trooper described as a, quote, hygiene kit, end quote. He didn't want to tell me more about that, and I didn't ask. The trooper said they were going to charge him on the warrants and on the federal firearm violation. He asked if I'd be willing to testify if it came to that. I said yes. It took about 14 months, but it eventually came to that. I had to fly out to Wyoming twice, once for a preliminary hearing and once for the actual trial. The prosecutor pulled the security footage from the diner and from the Pilot. The diner had 2 cameras inside. One pointed at the counter, the other pointed at the booths. In the booth camera, you can see Dennis Holcomb the entire time I'm in there. The prosecutor showed the jury the footage frame by frame. He never opened the menu. He moved seats twice. The first time was when I sat down at the counter, so he could see me better. The second time was about 10 minutes in, when I shifted on the stool, so he could see me better again. He watched me eat for 41 minutes without ever taking a drink of his coffee. The Pilot footage showed him pulling around the gas pumps and parking at the truck island. The prosecutor walked the jury through it. There was no reason for him to be there. The only reason to be there was me. His lawyer tried to argue he was a man who'd had a weird night, said he was lonely, said he just wanted somebody to look at. The jury didn't buy it. They came back in 3 hours. He was convicted on the warrants and on the firearm charge and on attempted kidnapping in the 2nd degree. He got 19 years. He'll be in his late 60s when he gets out. I want to tell you a few things about what I learned from this. The first thing is the CB. I don't know for certain that he was monitoring Channel 19, and the prosecutor never proved he was. But he left within 40 seconds of me getting on that radio. 40 seconds. I think he heard me. I think he heard me say, I had somebody coming, and I knew his plate and his truck, and he made the call right then to leave. If I hadn't been a trucker, if I hadn't had the CB, I don't know what would have happened at that Pilot. There was nobody else at the truck island by then. The other driver had already left. The second thing is the diner. The reason he picked me, I think, is because I was alone in the middle of the night in a place where nobody was going to remember either of us. The waitress who took my order was tired and just wanted to get through her shift. She didn't even ring me up. I put cash on the counter. If he had grabbed me in that parking lot, the only thing on camera would have been the back of his head as he walked out the door. Nobody at that diner would have been able to tell anybody anything. The third thing is the fake call. I made up Bobby on the spot. I didn't plan it, but what I did plan, a long time before that night, was a rule. The rule is this: if something feels wrong, I act like it's wrong. I don't wait for it to get worse so I can confirm it. I don't tell myself I'm being paranoid. If my gut says something is off, I treat it like it's off, every time, without exception. That rule is the only reason I'm here telling you this. I still drive that lane. I still run Salt Lake to Omaha and back. But I don't stop at that diner anymore. I don't even take that exit. I'd rather drive an extra 40 minutes to the next truck stop than ever pull into that lot again. Joanne, the waitress I used to know, retired about 6 months after all this. The diner closed in the spring of 2024. I drove past it last month, and the windows were boarded up and the parking lot had weeds growing through the asphalt. Dennis Wayne Holcomb is in a medium security prison in Wyoming. I looked it up once. I'm not going to look it up again. I don't need to know any more about him than I already do. I know what he was. I know what he was going to do. I know I'm the reason he didn't. That's enough. I almost didn't answer the Facebook message because I didn't recognize the name. It came in on a Wednesday night while I was eating dinner over the sink in my apartment. His profile picture was an older guy standing next to a pickup truck, wearing a camo jacket and holding a coffee cup. His name was Wayne Pritchard. I had no clue who he was. The message said, "Hey bud, you probably don't remember me. I was good friends with your dad. Saw your name pop up and thought I'd reach out. Hope you're doing all right." I read it 3 times before I replied. My dad died when I was 16. Heart attack. No warning. He was 48. One day he was leaving for work with a travel mug in his hand. And that night my mom was sitting on the kitchen floor because she couldn't stand up after the hospital called. I was 23 when Wayne messaged me. By then, I had gotten used to people bringing my dad up in weird little bursts. Old co-workers would comment on birthday posts. A guy from his church softball team once sent me a picture of him holding a bat and wrote, "Your old man could still hit," stuff like that. So I replied, "Hey, thanks for reaching out. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I remember you." He answered right away, "No worries at all. You were young. Your dad and I used to hunt together out near Lolo Pass. He talked about you constantly." That got me. My dad did hunt near Lolo Pass. Not every year, but enough that I remembered him packing coolers in the garage and coming home smelling like cold air, coffee, and gun oil. He had a couple friends he went with, but I didn't know all their names. I mostly remembered one guy named Mark because he had a loud laugh and brought us smoked trout sometimes. I asked Wayne how he knew my dad. He said they worked together for a while at a machine shop outside Missoula and stayed close after that. He said they did a few elk trips, helped each other with projects, and got each other through some rough patches. That last part felt private enough that I believed him. We messaged for maybe 20 minutes. He told me my dad had been proud of me. He said my dad used to talk about how I took apart radios and old computers. That was true. I used to do that all the time. He said my dad always figured I'd end up doing something with my hands or with electronics. That was true too. I work as a low-voltage technician now, mostly security systems, access control, cameras, that kind of thing. I asked him if he had any pictures. He sent one a few minutes later. It was a photo of my dad standing beside a truck in a gravel lot, wearing the old brown Carhartt jacket that my mom still had in a closet. He was holding a paper plate with a burger on it. The picture looked like it had been taken at a company picnic or something. I had never seen it before. I stared at it for a long time. Then Wayne wrote, "He'd be proud of you, kid." I didn't know what to do with that. I just typed, "Thank you." That was how it started. For the first couple weeks, it was normal enough. Wayne would message me every few days. Sometimes he sent pictures. Some were of my dad. Some were just old hunting areas, trailheads, muddy trucks, stuff like that. He told short stories, nothing huge, just normal guy stories. He said my dad once forgot coffee filters and used a paper towel. He said my dad hated sleeping in tents if there was a truck nearby. He said my dad called cheap flashlights dead batteries with handles. That sounded exactly like him. I didn't tell my mom about Wayne at first. Not because I was hiding it, I just didn't think it was a big deal. My mom had remarried by then, and she didn't like getting surprised by grief. Some days she could talk about Dad for an hour. Other days, one picture would shut her down. I figured I'd mention Wayne when it felt natural. The first time he called me, I almost didn't pick up. I was in the parking lot of a hardware store, waiting on a coworker to bring out conduit. My phone rang from a number I didn't know. I let it go to voicemail, then checked the transcript. "Hey bud, it's Wayne. Just wanted to hear your voice, I guess. No pressure. Call me anytime." That made me uncomfortable, but not enough to block him. I told myself older guys just talk like that. Some of my dad's friends had always been overly sentimental after a couple beers. I figured Wayne was lonely. I called him back that night. His voice was lower than I expected. Gravelly, slow. He sounded nervous at first, then got more comfortable. He asked about my job. He asked if I still lived around Missoula. I told him I had an apartment off Brook Street. I didn't give the address, but even saying the area felt like too much after I said it. He told me he lived outside Stevensville. He said he had been divorced for years. No kids. He said, "I always figured your dad would have me around more as you got older, but life happened." I didn't really know what that meant, so I said, "Yeah." Then he said, "I guess I always thought of you a little like family." That was the first thing that made me pause. I didn't remember ever meeting him. Still, I let it go. A week later, he asked if I wanted to get coffee. I said maybe sometime. He said, "I know that means no, but I'll take it." I felt bad and told him Sunday morning would work. We met at a diner near Reserve Street. I got there early and parked where I could see the door. I don't know why. Maybe because he still felt like a stranger, even though he had my dad's photos. Wayne came in wearing the same camo jacket from his profile picture. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. Big hands, gray mustache, hair tucked under a faded Montana Grizzlies hat. He looked like half the guys you see standing in line at the feed store. He recognized me before I stood up. He smiled, but his eyes got wet almost immediately. "Man," he said, "you look just like him." "I don't, really. I have my mom's face. My dad was broad and dark-haired and had a broken nose from high school wrestling. I'm thinner, lighter-haired, and my nose is normal. But people say that when someone dies. They look for them in whoever is left." I gave him an awkward hug because he opened his arms. He held on longer than I expected. Coffee was fine at first. He told me stories I mostly liked hearing. He talked about my dad getting his truck stuck in mud. He talked about them fixing a busted trailer jack in a snowstorm. He talked about my dad singing along to old country songs even though he didn't know the words. Some of it felt real. Some of it felt too polished, like he had practiced it. At one point, he reached across the table and put his hand over mine. I pulled back without thinking. He smiled like I had embarrassed him. "Sorry," he said. "Just hard seeing you groan." I laughed a little because I didn't know what else to do. When the waitress came by, he told her, "This is my best friend's boy." She said, "That's nice." Wayne looked at me and said, "Closest thing I ever had to one of my own." That bothered me more than the hand thing. After coffee, he walked me to my truck. He looked at it for too long. "Your dad would have liked this," he said. It was a used Tacoma with a cracked fog light and a dent in the tailgate. My dad would have told me I paid too much. Wayne asked if I hunted. I said not really anymore. He looked genuinely disappointed. "That's a shame," he said. "Your dad would have wanted you out there." I said, "Maybe." He said, "I could take you, show you some of the places he loved." I told him I'd think about it. When I got in my truck, he stayed standing beside the driver's window. I had to start the engine before he stepped back. That night he sent me a message. "Good seeing you today. Felt like having a piece of your dad back." I didn't answer until the next morning. I wrote, "Same here. Thanks for the coffee." He replied, "Anytime, son." I stared at that word for a while. Son. I told myself it was just how older men talked. Some guys call everyone son, cashiers, mechanics, waiters. It didn't have to mean anything. But Wayne kept using it. "Morning, son. Proud of you, son. Call me when you can, son." I stopped replying every time. I didn't want to encourage it, but if I waited too long, he would send something like, "Did I say something wrong?" Or, "Sorry if I'm bothering you. Guess I just miss your dad." Then I'd feel guilty and answer. The second time we met, he brought gifts. He asked me to stop by a Cabela's parking lot because he had a few things your dad would have wanted you to have. I should have said no. I know that now. At the time, I thought maybe he had an old knife or some photos. He opened the back of his truck and pulled out a cardboard box. Inside was a flannel shirt, a pocket knife, a compass, a small tackle box, and a framed photo of my dad. The photo was real. The rest, I wasn't sure. I picked up the flannel. It smelled like Wayne's truck, old cigarettes and pine air freshener. I said, "Was this his?" Wayne said, "He left it with me years ago." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But my dad was not the kind of person who left clothes with people. He kept everything in bins, labeled with masking tape. My mom still had most of his hunting stuff. I said, "I'll ask my mom if she remembers it." Wayne's face changed. Not a lot, just enough. His smile stayed there, but his eyes didn't. "Your mom and I didn't really see eye to eye," he said. That was new. I said, "Oh, I didn't know you knew her." He shut the truck tailgate a little harder than he needed to. "Not well, she kept him on a short leash." I didn't like that. My mom and dad had a good marriage. Not perfect, because nobody does, but good. She did not keep him on a leash. If anything, she was the reason he got out of the house at all. She pushed him to go hunting, take trips, see friends, stop working Saturdays. I said she was pretty good to him. Wayne looked at me, then nodded. "Sure," he said. "Of course." I should have left the box there. Instead, I took it. Again, guilt. Again, that stupid feeling that if I rejected him, I was rejecting some piece of my dad. That night, I finally called my mom. I didn't even get through the full name before she went quiet. I said, "Do you remember a Wayne Pritchard?" She didn't answer. "Mom, why?" He messaged me. He said he knew Dad. "How long has he been talking to you?" The way she asked it made me sit down. "A few weeks." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing serious." "Did you tell him where you live?" "No, not my address." "Did you meet him?" I didn't answer fast enough. She said, "Please tell me you didn't meet him." I felt like a kid again. "Mom, what's going on?" She took a breath, but it sounded shaky. "Your father was not friends with Wayne." I looked at the box on my kitchen table. He had pictures of him. They worked together for maybe 6 months. He said they hunted together. No. He knew stuff. What stuff? I told her about Lolo Pass, the coffee filters, the flashlight joke, the truck in the mud. She said, "Some of that could have come from Facebook. Some from people at the shop. Some he may have overheard. Your dad was friendly with everybody. That didn't make them friends." I asked why she sounded scared. She said, "Because Wayne had a problem with boundaries." That was the exact phrase she used. A problem with boundaries. Then she told me things I had never heard. When my dad worked at the machine shop, Wayne had latched on to him. That was how my mom put it. At first, it was normal. He asked my dad to lunch, asked for help with his truck, called a lot. Then it got strange. He started showing up at the house. He brought gifts. He wanted to take me fishing when I was 6 or 7, even though my parents barely knew him. He told people at work that my dad was his brother. My dad got uncomfortable and tried to back away. Wayne did not take it well. He called the house late at night. He left long voicemails. He accused my mom of turning my dad against him. One time, my mom found him sitting in his truck across from our house after midnight. My dad reported him to his boss. Wayne was fired not long after, though my mom didn't know if that was the only reason. I couldn't talk for a second. I kept looking at the flannel in the box. My mom asked what he gave me. I told her. She said, "Your dad never owned a compass like that." I picked it up. It was scratched, but not old. Not really. "What about the knife?" "Send me a picture." I did. She replied, "Not his." I sent the framed photo. That one took longer. Then she called me back. "Where did he get that?" "I don't know. That was from the shop picnic. I've never seen that copy." She told me to stop talking to him. Not slowly, not carefully. Just stop. Block him. Don't answer calls. Don't meet him. Don't explain. I said, "Should I give the stuff back?" "No." "What if he comes looking for it?" "Call the police." That was the first time I actually felt scared. After we hung up, I put the box in the closet. Then I took it back out and moved it to the trunk of my truck because I didn't want it in my apartment. Then I worried he had somehow tracked the box or put something in it, which sounds paranoid, but at that point I didn't trust anything. I went through every item. The flannel had nothing in the pockets. The tackle box had old hooks and sinkers. The compass was just a compass. The frame had cardboard backing with those little metal tabs. I pulled it apart and found nothing. The knife was normal. Still, I drove to a dumpster behind a grocery store and threw away everything except the photo. I couldn't throw away a picture of my dad. I took it out of the frame and kept it in my glove box. Then I blocked Wayne. For about 2 days, nothing happened. Then I got a message request from a different account. The profile had no photo. The name was WP. "You didn't have to block me." I deleted it. An hour later, another message. "I don't know what your mother told you, but there are 2 sides." I deleted that too. Then he called from a blocked number. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Hey bud, I don't want to do this over messages. You know me. I would never hurt you. Your mother never liked me because your dad trusted me. That's the truth. Call me back." I saved the voicemail. The next day, there was a folded note under my windshield wiper at work. My job has a small lot behind our office. Customers don't usually park there. You have to know it exists. The note was written on yellow legal paper. "Your dad would be ashamed of how you're treating me." That was all it said. I stood there holding it and my hands went numb. I showed my boss. His name is Eric. He's a quiet guy, ex-military, not the type to overreact. He read the note, looked around the lot and said, "Go inside." He checked our camera system. The angle wasn't great, but it caught a blue Ford Ranger pulling into the lot at 11:16 that morning. A man got out, walked to my truck, put the note under the wiper, and left. We couldn't see his face clearly, but I knew it was Wayne. Eric told me to file a report. I did. The officer who took it was polite but not very interested. He said since the note wasn't a direct threat, they couldn't do much right then. He told me to keep records and call if Wayne showed up again. I asked if someone could tell him to leave me alone. The officer said they could try if I had his number and address. I had his number, but not his address. That night, I searched him online. I found an address outside Stevensville. I also found court records. Nothing violent that I could see. A divorce. A couple traffic tickets. One old misdemeanor trespassing charge from years back that had been dismissed. I couldn't see details. I sent everything to my mom. She called me right away. "You need to stay somewhere else tonight." I said, "I'm fine." She said, "You are not listening to me. He used to sit outside our house." That got through. I packed a bag and stayed at Ryan's place. Different Ryan than the Airbnb story, obviously. This Ryan was my friend from work. Big guy, married, 2 kids, lives in a house with too many dogs. His wife, Marissa, made up the couch and didn't ask many questions, which I appreciated. At 2:13 in the morning, my phone lit up. Blocked number. I silenced it. Then again. Then again. Then came a voicemail. I played it on speaker with Ryan standing in the kitchen holding a baseball bat, because that was the kind of week it had become. Wayne's voice sounded different. Not drunk exactly. Tired. Angry under the tired. You're making a mistake. You're letting her poison you. I loved your dad. I was there when nobody else was. I'm the one who knows what he wanted for you. You need a man in your life. You always did. Marissa whispered. Oh my God. The voicemail kept going. I'm not some stranger. You don't get to throw me away. Your dad promised me I'd be part of your life if anything happened to him. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie the second I heard it. My dad would never have promised that. Not to a man my mom barely trusted. Not without telling her. Not without writing it down. Not like that. I saved the voicemail too. The next morning, Ryan drove me to the police station. Having him there helped. I played the voicemail. I showed the messages. I showed the note. I showed the work camera clip. This time, they listened. An officer called Wayne while we were sitting there. He put it on speaker after telling Wayne he was being contacted about unwanted communication. Wayne sounded calm at first. He said, "I'm just trying to help the boy." The officer said, "He is an adult, and he does not want contact with you." Wayne said, "That's his mother talking." The officer said, "No, he's here." There was a pause. Then Wayne said, "Let me talk to him." The officer said no. Wayne said, "He needs to hear the truth." The officer repeated that he was not to contact me, come to my home, come to my work, or approach my vehicle. Wayne said, "I understand." But the way he said it did not sound like he understood. It sounded like he was trying not to say something else. For 5 days, nothing happened. I went home. I changed my locks even though I had no reason to think he had a key. I put a camera in my window facing the parking lot. I started parking under the light. I checked my back seat every time I got in my truck. I hated that he had done that to my life so fast. On the 6th day, my neighbor knocked on my door. Her name is Angela. She lives across the hall and has 2 little boys. I barely knew her beyond saying hi. She said, "Hey, sorry, weird question. Is your dad around?" I just stared at her. She looked embarrassed. "There was a man here yesterday asking which unit was yours. He said he was your dad." My mouth went dry. What did he look like? She described Wayne. Older, mustache, baseball cap, camo jacket. I asked what she told him. She said she didn't tell him anything because he gave her a bad feeling. He had been standing too close to her door, and he kept looking past her into the apartment. He asked if I lived alone. He asked what time I usually came home. He said he wanted to surprise me. Angela said, "I told him I didn't know you. I could have hugged her." I called the police again. They came, took another report, and talked to Angela. She had a doorbell camera and it had him on video. Clear this time. Wayne standing in my hallway smiling at her camera before she opened the door. That video changed things. The officer said they would contact him again and that I should look into a protective order. My mom drove up from Hamilton the next morning and went with me to file the paperwork. I hadn't seen her that angry in years. Not crying angry, cold angry. While we waited at the courthouse, she told me more. She said the worst incident happened when I was 8. My dad had taken me to a hardware store on a Saturday morning. When we came home, Wayne was sitting on our porch. He had brought me a birthday present even though my birthday had been 3 months earlier. My dad told him to leave. Wayne started crying and saying my dad was abandoning him. When my dad tried to close the door, Wayne put his hand on it and said, "You can't keep him from me too." I didn't remember that. My mom said they didn't tell me because I was little, and after Wayne got fired, he disappeared. Until now. The temporary order was granted. Wayne was served 2 days later. That night, someone left a cardboard box outside my apartment door. No knock, no note. I found it at 7 the next morning when I was leaving for work. For a second, I thought it was a package for Angela because she ordered things constantly. Then I saw my name written on top in black marker. Not just my first name, my full name, my middle name too. I did not touch it. I went back inside, locked the door, and called the police. It took them almost an hour to get there. During that hour, I stood in my kitchen staring at my front door. Every sound in the hallway made my chest tighten. Angela texted me from across the hall and said she had taken her boys to school and hadn't seen who left it. The officers opened the box. Inside were photos. Not a few photos, stacks of them. Some were old pictures of my dad. Some looked like they were taken from a distance. My dad getting into his truck. My dad standing outside the machine shop. My dad in our driveway, carrying groceries. My mom watering plants in the front yard. Me as a kid riding a bike without training wheels. Then newer ones. Me leaving work. Me pumping gas. Me walking into my apartment building. Me sitting in my truck outside a Taco Bell, looking at my phone. There were printouts of my Facebook posts. My old graduation announcement. My mom's wedding announcement when she remarried. My dad's obituary, folded and unfolded so many times the creases were soft. At the bottom of the box was the framed photo I had thrown away. Not the picture, the frame, the exact frame. The glass was cracked. There was a note taped to it. I kept what you threw away. I had thrown that frame in a grocery store dumpster miles from my apartment. That meant he had either followed me there or found it later somehow. I still don't know which option is worse. The police took the box. One of the officers told me very plainly, "You should not stay here tonight." I didn't. I moved in with my mom and stepdad for a while. That felt humiliating at 23, but I was too tired to care. My stepdad, Paul, didn't make a big thing of it. He just helped me carry my bags into the spare room and said, "You're safe here." Paul is not an emotional guy. He fixes tractors, watches baseball, and says maybe 10 words during dinner. But that night, he sat in the living room with a rifle across his lap until morning. Wayne violated the order 3 days later. He sent a letter to my mom's house, not through the mail. He left it in the mailbox, which is apparently also illegal, though that was the least of it. The letter was 6 pages long. I only read the first page before my mom took it from me. It started with, "I know you're all trying to make me look sick." Then it said my dad had chosen him to guide me. It said my mom had stolen me from him. It said I had been trained to fear the wrong man. It said Wayne had waited years for me to be old enough to understand. That line made me feel like I was going to throw up. He had waited years, not missed my dad, not wanted closure, waited. The police took that too. After that, things moved faster. They arrested Wayne for violating the order and stalking. I don't know every charge. I just know he spent a short time in jail, then bonded out. That terrified me, but by then the case had enough weight that people were taking it seriously. A detective named Harris came to talk to us at my mom's house. He had the box of photos, he had the letters, he had the voicemails, he had footage from my work and apartment. He had messages from both Facebook accounts. He also had something else, a storage unit. Wayne had stopped paying for a small storage unit in Missoula a month earlier. The facility owner had started the auction process, then recognized Wayne's name from a police inquiry and called it in. The detective asked if we were willing to come identify items. My mom said yes before I did. The storage facility was one of those rows of orange doors off a frontage road. We met Detective Harris there on a cold morning that smelled like wet dust and diesel. Paul came with us, so did another officer. When they rolled up the door, I expected junk, old furniture, tools, maybe more photos. There was some of that, but most of it was us. Plastic bins with labels. My dad's name, my mom's name, my name, years written in black marker. Inside were newspaper clippings, printed photos, notebooks, old birthday cards, copied documents, maps, and things I recognized from our old house. A broken taillight lens from my dad's truck. A baseball glove I thought we had donated. A school photo of me from 4th grade, still in the little paper folder. A Christmas ornament with my name painted on it. My mom picked it up, stared at it, and said, "This was missing after we moved." Nobody spoke for a while. Detective Harris opened one of the notebooks. He didn't let us read much, but I saw enough. Dates, times. Boy rode bike with red helmet. D home 6:32. Wife left 8:15. D angry today. Boy taller. The handwriting got worse in later notebooks. Bigger, harder pressed. Some pages had my dad's name written over and over. Some had mine. There were also letters Wayne had written and never sent. One was addressed to my dad. One was addressed to me when I was 12. One was addressed to me on my 18th birthday. That one began, "Now that you're a man, maybe you can finally know me." I remember stepping outside after that and leaning against Paul's truck because I couldn't breathe right. My mom came out a minute later. She looked smaller than usual, like the storage unit had taken something out of her. She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "For what?" "For not telling you." I told her I was glad she didn't, and I meant it. What was she supposed to say when I was a kid? There's a man who thinks he belongs to this family. There's a man your dad was afraid of. There's someone watching from outside the normal parts of life. No, she did what parents do. She kept it away from me until she couldn't. The case did not turn into some dramatic movie thing. There was no big trial where everyone clapped. Wayne's lawyer tried to make him sound like a lonely older man who had handled grief badly. But the storage unit changed everything. So did the photos of me as a child. So did the note saying he kept what I threw away. He ended up taking a plea. Stalking. Violation of the protective order. A few other charges tied to harassment and trespassing. I don't remember every legal term because honestly, by then I just wanted it over. He got jail time, probation after that, and a long protective order that included me, my mom, and Paul. It didn't feel like enough. Maybe nothing would have, but it was something. Before sentencing, I got to make a statement. I didn't want to, then I did. Then I almost backed out. In the end, I stood there with my hands shaking and read from a piece of paper. I told the judge that Wayne didn't love my dad. He collected him. He didn't miss our family. He studied us. He didn't want to help me. He wanted access. He wanted a role nobody gave him. He used my grief as a door and got angry when I closed it. Wayne stared at the table the whole time. He did not look at me once. That bothered me at first. Then I was glad. When it was over, my mom cried in the parking lot. Paul put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Your dad would have hated that guy." For some reason, that helped more than anything else anyone said. I moved out of my apartment after the lease ended. I changed jobs a few months later too, not just because of Wayne, but because every time a blue Ford Ranger drove by the office, I lost focus for the rest of the day. I live in a different town now. My social media is locked down. I don't accept message requests from people I don't know. I don't post where I work. I don't tag restaurants until after I've left. I kept the photo of my dad from the shop picnic. That might sound strange, considering where it came from. But Wayne didn't own that memory. He didn't get to make every picture dirty. My dad is standing there in his brown jacket, holding a paper plate, squinting because someone took the picture facing the sun. He looks annoyed, which makes me laugh because that was him. He hated pictures. I asked my mom if she wanted me to get rid of it. She said no, he's yours, not Wayne's. So I kept it. The thing I still think about the most is how normal Wayne seemed at first. Not charming, not slick, just normal. A lonely guy with a truck and old stories. He knew just enough true things to make the lies easier to swallow. He knew where my dad hunted. He knew the jacket. He knew the jokes. He knew the kind of man I missed. That was what made it work. If he had come in acting obsessed right away, I would have blocked him on day one. But he didn't. He started with pictures, then coffee, then gifts, then sun. Then he wanted more replies, more time, more permission, more space in my life. By the time he said, "You need a man in your life," I already knew what he really meant. He didn't want to be my dad's friend. He wanted to replace him. And the worst part is, he had been waiting for his chance since I was a kid.